The boy returned home after a long, ordinary day at school, completely unaware of the shadows waiting inside. The moment he stepped through the door, a hidden thug lunged from behind and struck him hard across the head with a cold steel bat. But instead of collapsing, the boy's hand shot out, gripping the attacker's shoulder with a strength that froze the man in disbelief. In the next instant, Sunwoo's fist connected with the thug's face, the impact so fierce it twisted his already shit face into something unrecognizable, like crushed flesh and shattered pride. The body fell limp to the ground, and as the echo of that hit filled the air, the rest of the thugs stiffened in pure terror. Sometime earlier, the same group of scumbags had stormed into Sunwoo's house, tearing through everything in their way. They came for this middle-aged couple, tormenting them without mercy. Apparently, Sunwoo's father had taken a loan from these sharks, and when he couldn't pay on time, this shithead decided to twist the situation into their own sick entertainment. One of them noticed the woman clutching her phone. He ripped it from her hand, thinking she was calling the cops. But no, she was just trying to warn her son not to come home. The message was never sent, and that tiny failure made the bastard's grin stretch wider, his eyes burning with twisted delight. The parents pleaded for mercy in desperation, but the bastard only laughed and ordered his goons to tie them up. The sound of footsteps approaching from outside made his face light up even more, his grin turning cruel. The same bitch now looked terrified, his teeth clenched, as he stared at Sunwoo in disbelief. Something unreal was radiating from the boy's body, a raw surge of power that made the air itself feel heavy. Blood still streamed down from his head, but Sunwoo stood tall, his presence alone enough to make the bastard flinch. The thug barked for his men to attack, and they rushed forward, shouting together like a pack of wild dogs. Sunwoo moved before they could blink. Two swings came flying at him. Both dodged with sharp precision. He dropped low and drove his fist into one thug's hip with brutal force, and the sound of shattering ribs echoed through the room. The man's scream tore out of him as his weapon slipped from his hand. Sunwoo's arm snapped back again, another punch slamming into the same spot, turning the ribcage into crushed mess. The thug's eyes bulged, veins popping under his skin as he shrieked in agony. Above Sunwoo's head, a boot came crashing down, but he spun, caught the bastard's leg midair, and kicked the other one clean out from under him. A sickening crack followed as the man's leg broke, and he crumpled backward. Another thug came swinging a chair from behind, slamming the edge straight into Sunwoo's skull, but the hit didn't even faze him. Blood dripped down his face as he lifted his head, eyes burning with pure hate. That glare alone sent a chill through the thug's spine, and before he could react, Sunwoo sent him flying. The man slammed into the wall near his boss, body folding from the impact. The boss froze, shock written all over his face as he watched his men get ripped apart like rag dolls. His hands trembled as he gripped a knife, then turned toward Sunwoo's parents. The bastard grabbed Sunwoo's father by the hair, lifting his head up like some sick display of dominance, thinking he could use him as bait. He had no clue how stupid that move really was. Sunwoo's hand reached for the hot iron resting nearby. In one swift motion, he hurled it straight at the thug's face. The iron connected with a heavy crunch, smashing the bastard's skull into the wooden door so hard, it blew a hole clean through. The body twitched, blood pouring down the frame, his teeth shattered and barely clinging on. The sound of his muffled cries filled the air as the rest of the hall lay silent, every one of his men already dead or broken at Sunwoo's hands. Panting, his head drenched in blood, Sunwoo stood among the wreckage. His parents stared at him, eyes wide with disbelief and horror. With the last of his strength, he dropped to his knees and began untying them, his breath heavy and uneven. He looked at them once more, exhaustion pulling him down, and his body finally gave out. His mother's cry echoed through the hall, raw and desperate, as her son collapsed at her feet. The hospital had turned into a war zone, thugs being hauled in, people shouting at medics, the air thick with panicked pleas and the metallic stink of blood. In the middle of that chaos, a man in a brown suit appeared at the reception, scanned the scene, and pushed forward to ask what was happening. The receptionist told him a high school student had taken down 10 thugs all by himself, and at the sound of that, the man's pupils constricted. Nearby, the thug leader lay in critical condition, and, between gasps, barked orders to his underlings to find that bastard and kill him. One subordinate warned that the kid was in the hospital too, and sneered that Black Bear had already left and the kid was probably dead. Hearing the name Black Bear made the man flinch and then move. He checked the computer, got room 202 inches the emergency, and ran. Footsteps echoed constant and fast as he sprinted toward the boy's room, thinking that if Black Bear was around, then this kid might be one of the 4 potential fighters he'd been hunting. This would help him assess the candidate's potential. He stopped at the door, read the nameplate Kang Sunwoo, and pressed his eye to the window. What he saw looked wrong on paper and terrifying in motion. Sunwoo squared off against a man 3 times his size, Black Bear, who had stormed into the hospital already bristling with aggression. Black Bear prowled like he'd been dragged there for a debt, eyes flashing a scary red and teeth bared in a grin that said he'd come to make an example. Sunwoo pulled out his saline like a last prop and braced himself. Black Bear raised his hand and swiped down, then charged forward with a fist aimed for the kid's face. The spectator outside adjusted his glasses, stunned by the speed of Sunwoo's response, but Black Bear got a grab first and slammed Sunwoo's head hard into the floor, driving him forward until blood spurted from his mouth and nose, and his eyes went wide like life had flickered inside and out. Black Bear looked at his bloodied hand and laughed, thinking the kid's attack only made him want to punch harder. He'd shown no fear, and that was all the excuse Black Bear needed to ramp up. But Sunwoo didn't stay down. Slowly, against all assumptions, he stood up again and wiped blood from his lips, a motion so small it felt like ice water to Black Bear, who tensed and decided to retaliate fully. He charged with his whole body, the room tightening into a single, violent moment. The spectator's heart thudded. There was a real worry that Black Bear might kill the kid. He moved to intervene, but Sunwoo slid free, lowered his body, snapped a leg up, and landed a brutal kick to Black Bear's face. The big man staggered backward, temple caving on one side with blood spraying from his ear, and the onlooker's pupils dilated with surprised delight. Stories didn't include Black Bear getting knocked like that, but Black Bear refused to be finished. He slammed his hand to the floor, righted himself, and laughed off the insult. He was the country's muscle king, after all. As he opened his mouth to gloat, Sunwoo struck again, a hit that shattered the hospital room floor from the impact of Black Bear's head. The spectacle grew absurd. The young man outside felt the world tilt. Sunwoo kept hitting the big man's face relentlessly until Black Bear, red with strain, stopped taking blows and wrapped his arms around Sunwoo's back, locking him in a crushing hold. The grin on Black Bear's face turned predatory. He decided to use his signature move, the Bone Crusher, on a high schooler. Black Bear tightened with the intent to break bones. He tilted his head back, sure he had the kid in hand. At that exact moment, the spectator flung the door open and rushed in, but neither combatant relented. The room contracted into a pressure chamber. Sunwoo began to straighten, an aura humming between them, and the observer froze, astonished as smoke seeped and the fight remained undecided. Black Bear's confidence faltered. His body went numb, despite the power he poured into the hold. Sunwoo gripped Black Bear's shoulders, lifted his head, and everything about the kid's bones was intact. Black Bear could only gape in disbelief, flexing every muscle and tightening his grip for a final, crushing squeeze, vowing to break him into pieces. The answer came brutal and immediate. Sunwoo slammed his head into Black Bear's face like a steel bar against cotton. Blood gushed. Black Bear's face began to shred, his mind racing to explain it. Were the kid's bones made of metal? Sunwoo didn't stop. He slammed his head again and again. Black Bear's face deformed as if something hard had been forced into it. The intensity lasted until the spectator finally spoke up and declared Black Bear unconscious, bent over Sunwoo to rub his back and tell him to calm down. The man surveyed Black Bear's body and warned that if the kid kept hammering the corpse, the cleanup would be messy. Then, with a calm that contradicted the chaos, he called the medical team. Room 202, Building B. Head injury due to a traffic accident. Please handle it. Sunwoo panted and looked up through the red fog at the man, asking who he was and whether he was on the thug's side. The man shrugged off the question with a dismissive attitude and said he'd been thinking about forming a team with Sunwoo, a proposition Sunwoo did not understand at all. The medical team filed in, paused in silence at Black Bear's corpse, and turned to the man to confirm. He nodded, and when the team leader asked how they could be sure Black Bear would not wake up again, the man ordered them to begin. They started clearing the body away. Sunwoo stared at the whole scene like it belonged to someone else, feeling alien in his own life. He asked what they were doing. The man handed him a red card and told him it was something that could give him everything he wanted. Sunwoo took the card, examined it with mild surprise, and the man explained that all Sunwoo had to do was fight for his boss. Sunwoo's answer was immediate and absolute. He crumpled the card, threw it in the trash, and walked to the door, muttering that he wasn't interested in fighting for money, calling it a straight-up scam. The man watched Sunwoo leave, clicked his tongue, and thought that the kid's thinking might change. He already figured that the boy would soon need the organization. Sunwoo stood in the men's restroom, splashing cold water on his face, trying to pull himself together. The mirror reflected a tired mess of a boy who muttered inside that even if his life was falling apart, he still had to fulfill his mother's wish never to fight again. But that thought barely settled before the restroom door creaked open, and his father appeared behind him. The man's presence instantly rewired Sunwoo's mood. When asked where he was going in such a state, anger flared instead of answers. The question struck like salt in an open wound, and his thoughts churned bitterly. He couldn't stop himself from blaming his father, a former boxing champion, once part of the national team. His mind replayed every frustration. A father who brought home nothing but debt, too proud to work in some rundown gym, even when his mother was sick in bed. But his father said nothing in return, just silence heavy and cold before leaving the restroom, telling him to stay in the hospital. That single line left Sunwoo simmering with resentment, cursing under his breath as the silence closed in around him. Then, the pain hit sharp and sudden. His head throbbed like it was splitting open, and he fell under the sink, clutching at his skull while thoughts blurred. He wondered if it was just exhaustion from lack of sleep, but then admitted to himself that every time he saw his father, his head started to ache. The past came flooding back in fragments, his mother's medical bills eating through their savings, his father once bowing his head in front of the parents of Sunwoo's bullies, and the helplessness that came with it. He told himself he couldn't trust his father for anything anymore. As a high schooler, he couldn't even afford to rent a fishing boat and couldn't change a thing about his life. He couldn't even manage daily expenses without breaking down. His mind flickered to that one friend who once offered him a way out, told him to become his subordinate. Sunwoo had brushed it off back then, too busy with his part-time jobs to care, but that small rejection had its price. He'd sent people to wreck his delivery bike out of spite, laughing that he was finished. Those memories never left. Because of those punks, his debts had grown worse, and with his mother sick at home, he couldn't even run away. His life sat at rock bottom. The next thing he knew, he was back on his hospital bed, clutching his head again. He must have fainted, but something felt different. He blinked around, confused, realizing this wasn't the same room. Panic pricked through his chest. He reached for his phone, trying to figure out how long he'd been out. A message from his father lit up the screen, a short, cryptic text saying it was time to tell him everything tonight. Sunwoo wondered what his father was hiding now. His thoughts drifted to his mother, and he opened her chat. Calling her seemed the only thing to do. But when someone else picked up, his gut twisted. A stranger's voice answered instead, urgent and shaky, warning him not to come home. Apparently, there were thugs waiting there. It wasn't safe. The voice told him he'd been moved to another hospital under a different name for protection, that he'd be fine if he stayed put. But worry clawed at him as he got out of bed, demanding to know about his mother. The stranger said she was hiding in a motel near the police station, and that she was safe but they couldn't talk longer. Before hanging up, the voice warned him not to go anywhere. Silence dropped again. Sunwoo stood still, phone shaking in his hand, and the guilt hit hard. He clenched his jaw, blaming himself for everything, for provoking those people, for dragging his family into this mess. His pulse spiked with desperation. He shoved his phone in his pocket and ran out of the room, deciding he had to find his mother first. Just then, his phone buzzed again, another call, his father's number. He answered, expecting him, but a completely different man's voice came through, informing him that his father had fallen and was unconscious. The words froze him. His father had apparently fallen from a high place while working and was now in critical condition, with broken limbs and severe blood loss. Soon after, Sunwoo found himself standing beside a hospital bed again, this time with his father lying there fully bandaged, the rhythmic sound of a respirator filling the room. The doctor's words still echoed in his mind. The surgery was dangerous. The cost alone was 100 million won, and recovery would take years of expensive treatment and rehab. Just thinking about it made his throat tighten until tears rolled down his face. He sat beside the bed, head in his hands, drowning in despair, unsure what he could possibly do now. But then his thoughts drifted back to that red card the man had given him earlier. He remembered throwing it away, but now it suddenly felt like the only lifeline left. He shot up with new urgency. If he wasn't mistaken, he had tossed it into the trash in room 202. By late afternoon, Sunwoo was sprinting back there, panting, breath short and burning. He reached the room and dragged the trash can toward him, praying it was still inside. But reality hit hard. The trash was gone. The card had disappeared. He sank to his knees, trembling, muttering in guilt and regret that it was all his fault. Tears ran down his face as he kept repeating apologies that no one would hear. In a moment of raw despair, he cursed himself, thinking maybe it would be easier if he just stopped existing altogether. But then fate turned on its own timing. At the door stood the same young man from before, holding up the red card like a sign from the heavens. Sunwoo froze, eyes widening, staring at it. The man stepped closer, calm as ever, and asked if Sunwoo had changed his mind. The next moment, Sunwoo found himself asking what the man could offer, and the response came like a shock. The offer was massive, at least 10 billion if he won, maybe more if he became famous even without victory. It was enough to stop his thoughts cold, to make him reconsider everything he'd sworn off before. And so, for the first time, Sunwoo really paused to think. Somewhere else, in a place called the Annex, Sunwoo was pulled into a private room for a meeting. The same young man from before slid a contract across the table and told him to sign if he agreed. Sunwoo glanced down. The paper detailed a fighting arena, an underground tournament where fighters with monstrous strength used hospital-supplied stimulants to compete. His eyes sharpened. He'd never heard the word stimulant before and said he didn't know anything about them. And the guy answered by pulling out a box full of vials, each holding different colored liquids that looked straight out of a mad scientist's drawer. The man lifted one vial and introduced it as if reciting a product pitch. This wasn't a run-of-the-mill boost. Depending on the type, it could turn a man on his deathbed into a walking monster. Using stimulants wasn't mandatory, but the implication was clear: nobody had ever truly won without them. Sunwoo bristled and insisted he would not use drugs, but the scout kept talking, promising that once Sunwoo entered the competition zone, he would understand the stimulants role himself. The scout apologized for not introducing himself earlier, introducing himself by name: Kim Min-sok, a scout working for a VIP who participated in the tournament. Sunwoo registered the title and registered another truth. What mattered right now wasn't who this guy was, but what he'd offered. Min-sok spoke fast and smooth. If Sunwoo passed the tournament and cracked the top 20, he'd get a sponsor. That sponsor would let him climb toward the championship. It was packaged like a ladder: fight, win, get sponsored, win more. Sunwoo pushed back with the only thing he trusted: money. He wanted the cash now, but Min-sok set a condition: payment came only during the tournament. Sunwoo slammed the table and lost his composure, furious at the idea of doing all the work for no upfront help. The outburst only made Min-sok lean in, colder now, and he played the one card that cut deep. He knew Sunwoo needed money for surgery and to keep his family safe. When Min-sok offered to cover the parents' safety, surgery, treatment, and even deal with debt collectors as long as Sunwoo fought for his boss, the world tilted. Sunwoo's phone buzzed at that exact moment. It was his mother on the line, and her voice, shaky and relieved, told him that his father's bill had been paid and that bodyguards had shown up. Min-sok had already prepared a safe hall for him to rest in, which left Sunwoo with no real choice. He told his mother to obey whoever was there and to wait, and then he hung up, frozen and expressionless. After wrestling with himself for a moment, Sunwoo asked the one question that mattered: how much for 10 billion won? Min-sok smirked and knocked the figure down to a benchmark. Depending on how much money people bet on him, the payout could multiply, even reaching 15 billion. Sunwoo repeated the numbers in his head, incredulous. Min-sok then delivered a harsher reality. Fighters paid steep prices, many became disabled, some lost their lives, and only about 10% of past participants walked away unscathed. He pointed to the signature box on the contract and explained how they would fake everything. The hospital existed as a perfect cover to create alibis. Record a fake camera clip, buy a registered item under your name, manufacture illness or side effects, anything to hide the truth. If Sunwoo reported them to police, they would just declare him a drug addict yelling about an underground tournament. Min-sok straightened and set the choice clearly in front of Sunwoo. It was entirely his decision, but most people took days to think. Sunwoo didn't. He placed his hand on the contract and signed, face dark and sinister, the weight of it sinking in like concrete. Min-sok's mouth curved into a calculating smile. The trap had been set. A nurse suddenly appeared behind Sunwoo with the speed of someone who'd been staging this all along. Before he could react, she injected him with something. Sunwoo shoved at the nurse, tried to resist, but it was too late. Dizziness crawled over his vision, colors bleeding at the edges, and Min-sok's voice blurred into a single syllable. It's only anesthesia, to move you to the competition area. The last clear thing Sunwoo heard was the condition laid out as if it were a simple rule. His parents' safety and medical bills would be covered only as long as he participated in the tournament, and he had to make sure to win and solve every problem. In a deep sleep, Sunwoo slowly began to wake, his body heavy, and his thoughts hazy. For a moment, he wondered if he was dead. His tired eyes opened gradually, and the first thing he saw was a member of the medical team standing nearby. Confused, he tried to figure out where they were taking him. He noticed they were pushing his bed into a dark area that didn't look like part of a normal hospital. When he asked where they were going, the man beside him only told him to stay quiet, saying they would arrive soon. Then, glancing down at Sunwoo, he told that this place was nothing but a hellhole. The scene then shifted to the tall building of Hosen Corporation. Inside, at a neatly arranged office, Cha Yun-woo, the vice president, sat at his desk. He looked at a photo placed before him, deep in thought, uncertain about the idea of using a high school student as a representative fighter. Even if that student had defeated Black Bear, it still sounded unrealistic. Across from him, Min-seok, wearing his usual calm expression and glasses, assured him that the plan made sense. He explained that the more ridiculous it looked, the better. If they wanted the vice president, who was obsessed with fighting arenas and high-stakes matches, to join the gamble, they had to make the setup look weak enough for him to underestimate it. Yeonwoo still seemed unsure, asking if they could really win with just a high schooler. Min-seok continued, saying they had tested Kang Sunwoo's bones after his last move, and the results were beyond imagination. His face showed a strange excitement as he ran a hand through his hair, visibly thrilled. Yeonwoo stared at him, taken aback by his reaction and unsure what exactly Min-seok meant by those words. Meanwhile, Sunwoo slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was a strange young man standing over him, about to step on his head. Realizing what was happening, he quickly sat up, startled, only to have a guard immediately point a gun at him. The young man backed away with his hands raised, laughing as if it were a joke. Above them, a drone hovered silently, its camera adjusting and zooming in toward Sunwoo's face before reporting that the player was fully confirmed awake. Confused, Sunwoo looked around, unsure where he was or why he was wearing such a strange uniform. Before he could gather his thoughts, the drone announced that the first random match was about to begin. He had no time to prepare, as a machine rose up in front of him, revealing a syringe on a small shelf. The screen displayed that this was the stimulant test round, where each player would be given a random stimulant to enhance a physical ability. The VIPs watching were already placing bets, their cameras flashing red lights as the match officially started. Across from him, his opponent grabbed the syringe instantly. Sunwoo, on the other hand, hesitated. He thought about his promise never to fight again, and especially not to use drugs. But before he could make a move, the opponent had already injected the entire contents of the syringe into his veins. His body began to tremble violently, muscles tightening, veins pulsing, and his expression twisting into a manic grin. The man shouted wildly as the stimulant surged through his body, his entire appearance changing in seconds. Sunwoo barely had time to process it before the man lunged forward with a flying kick that nearly shattered the wall. Sliding across the floor, Sunwoo managed to dodge at the last second, wondering what kind of monster he was facing. A few moments ago, his opponent had been thin and weak, but now his body had bulked up, muscles rippling with unnatural power. The drone continued recording, announcing that fighter Han Chol had successfully doped and increased his strength. The man smirked and muttered something about showing everyone who had called him a loser. He charged again, landing right in front of Sunwoo and glaring down at him with excitement. Without hesitation, Sunwoo swung a punch that connected with his opponent's nose, but the man barely flinched. Wiping his mouth, he straightened up, unaffected, while Sunwoo realized that his reaction speed hadn't improved enough. Before he could think further, the man rushed in like a beast, landing a heavy blow to Sunwoo's head that sent him crashing to the floor. Blood filled his mouth as Sunwoo bit his lip, thinking that even if he couldn't match the monster's strength, he could still aim for the face. Supporting himself on one hand, he kicked back hard, but the man countered with a brutal headbutt that sent Sunwoo flying again. His back hit the ground hard as he coughed up blood. The man laughed, gripping Sunwoo's leg and lifting him into the air, saying that brute force was all he needed. Then he slammed Sunwoo onto the floor with such strength that the tiles cracked under the impact. Blood poured from Sunwoo's face as the man laughed uncontrollably, preparing to crush him again. Jumping high into the air, he came down with a heavy stomp that pinned Sunwoo's chest to the ground. Dust and debris scattered from the force, and the man laughed even harder, enjoying the sound of ribs breaking. The scene shifts in the past. Min Seok had once told the vice president that after testing Kang Sunwoo's body against Black Bear's attack, the results were unbelievable. His bones were 10 times harder than a normal person's, which amazes him. Back in the arena, that truth showed itself again. Sunwoo, despite the impact, moved, blood dripping from his head but his eyes sharp. He grabbed the man's leg and twisted it, flipping his body backward to kick him squarely in the face. The man tried to grab him again, but Sunwoo had already anticipated it, pulling back quickly and rotating his body to avoid his reach. His movements were faster, more calculated. His opponent was growing exhausted, panting and stumbling, his stamina fading with every exchange. Sunwoo could tell the stimulant's effect was wearing off. He steadied himself, ready to counter. Moving lightly on his feet, he dodged every attack and found openings to strike the man's face again and again. Each hit landed cleanly until his opponent started to falter, dazed from the repeated blows. Sensing his chance, Sunwoo pulled his elbow back to deliver a final strike, but before he could, the man suddenly lunged and trapped Sunwoo's arm, tightening his grip with a mocking grin. The man gloated that Sunwoo had been too excited to notice the setup, but Sunwoo wasn't done. Using his opponent's grip as support, he pushed his entire body upward, spinning and kicking him directly in the face. The man couldn't defend himself in time, his teeth shattered, and he was sent flying backward, blood gushing from his mouth. As he hit the ground, he struggled to understand what had happened. Weakly lifting his head, he looked toward the shelf and spotted the leftover syringe, the one our MC hadn't used. Crawling desperately, he reached for it and stabbed it into his neck, injecting another dose of stimulant. His eyes turned blood red as his body convulsed. The drone immediately reported successful use of an endurance stimulant. He roared and charged, slamming his back into Sunwoo's stomach, making him cough blood and collapse. Lifting him up again, he screamed in fury and threw him down with brutal force. The impact left Sunwoo nearly unconscious as the drone moved closer to assess the condition, only for the crazed fighter to shove it away, yelling incoherently. He staggered toward Sunwoo, placing both hands on his throat, tightening his grip until Sunwoo could barely breathe. The man muttered that this was what insects like him deserved, squeezing harder with a twisted grin. As Sunwoo's vision blurred, a single thought flashed through his fading consciousness: his father. Then, a sharp splatter of blood broke through the chaos. But the blood wasn't our boy, it his opponent, who died on spot. The drone, steady again, scanned the scene and reported that the match was over due to the death of one player. Watching through the monitor, Yeonwoo questioned what had happened, while Min-seok explained that it was an overdose. He adjusted his glasses and stated that the survival rate for taking 2 stimulants was below 5%. He further analyzed that the fighter had succeeded with a strength enhancer, but died after injecting the endurance stimulant. Yeonwoo admitted that Sunwoo had been lucky, but Min-seok disagreed, saying it might not be luck at all. He mentioned that Sunwoo's body was far from normal bones that couldn't be broken, even in a place full of monsters. He explained that stimulants could enhance almost anything: muscles, hormones, physical limits, but not bones, which meant there was something special about him. Yeonwoo decided to see how effective that would be once Sunwoo entered the main round. Min-seok replied that since Sunwoo had passed the stimulant testing round, he would first receive treatment before joining the others. On the monitor, the medical team carried Sunwoo's limp body toward the treatment room. His eyes, half open, still flickered with faint awareness as he was placed on an examination bed. Sitting quietly, he stared at the floor without a word. The scene of his opponent dying replayed over and over in his mind, the memory of almost dying himself still fresh. He thought of his father lying bandaged in the hospital and clenched his jaw. In his heart, he reminded himself that he was the only one who could save his father and mother. When the MC raised his head, he saw the drone hovering in front of him, its camera pointed straight at his face. It immediately announced that all players who had passed the match should now proceed to the lobby. The medical staff nearby explained that, from this point on, the machine would answer all his questions, and as long as he stayed with it, he would be fine. They warned him not to do anything reckless, since the drones were all armed with lethal weapons. Our boy quietly followed the drone toward a metallic door. As it slid open, he found himself stepping out of the same cave he had been thrown into earlier. His mind was filled with questions. He stared at the surroundings, an underground system that looked more like a prison than an arena. The realization hit him that this place was built to ensure no one could escape. Following the drone further, he muttered under his breath, frustrated that he couldn't contact his mother. He told himself that at least they had promised his parents safety. He would have to survive no matter what. This tournament wasn't anything like he had imagined. Outside, people thought he was some terrifying monster. But here, even random strangers looked like beasts. The thought of the earlier fight still made his body tense. He couldn't help but wonder just how much stronger the others would be. Then, the drone's voice echoed again, commanding to open the arena. The massive gate in front of him slowly lifted, and a strange light spilled out from inside. As he stepped through, he was met with a vast chamber filled with dozens of drones flying above. They were all recording devices, scanning every player in sight. The system announced that all players had entered, and that the tournament would begin with 124 participants. In front of him stood rows of fighters, most of them towering, muscular, and battle-hardened. The scene felt unreal, almost monstrous. A large holographic projector flickered to life, instructing everyone to pay attention to the briefing. Sunwoo glanced around and realized the opponents here were on an entirely different level than the one he had faced earlier. His guard instinctively went up. Trying to avoid unnecessary trouble, Sunwoo blended into the crowd, keeping quiet. He told himself that the best way to survive until the main match was to stay unnoticed. But that thought barely lasted a moment before a deep voice came from behind him. A large man loomed over his shoulder, mocking him for being a high school kid and offering to play with him. Sunwoo's jaw tightened as irritation crept in. The uniform he wore was already drawing too much attention, and he silently cursed the delay in the instructions starting. As he passed through a group of fighters, he overheard 2 men whispering. They said the high schooler had survived only because his opponent had overdosed on stimulants. One of them sounded curious, realizing that meant Sunwoo hadn't used any drugs yet. They speculated that someone like him must be backed by wealthy sponsors who enjoyed watching people suffer. Another suggested playing around with him for fun, but the first quickly warned that others were already targeting him. Before Sunwoo could react, another voice called his name from behind. Without turning, he immediately recognized the tone. It was the same guy who had tried provoking him earlier. The man taunted him again, saying that if someone invited him to play and he didn't answer, he'd have to pay the price. Sunwoo clenched his jaw, trying to stay calm. If he wanted to survive in this hell filled with lunatics, he would have to act just as insane as they were. When the man raised his hand to strike, someone suddenly stepped in between them, catching his wrist mid-swing. Sunwoo blinked in surprise. It was a muscular fighter standing in front of him, shielding him from the attack. The large man glared, annoyed by the interruption, and gripped the newcomer's arm tightly until the muscle fibers tensed. Even though his skin began to burn from the friction, the man didn't flinch. He simply said it wasn't worth fighting a high school kid, and pulled his arm away, revealing faint burn marks. The big man smirked, mocking him for trying to interfere with just one stimulant-boosted arm, and asked if he really wanted to die protecting that kid. Sunwoo felt humiliated by the situation, but he stayed still, pretending it didn't bother him. He figured it was better to swallow his pride than get caught in a pointless fight. The situation escalated when the big man raised his fist again, ready to strike, declaring that both of them could die together. The muscular man met the attack head-on, throwing his own punch. Watching the clash about to happen, Sunwoo felt his instincts kick in. He turned to shout, realizing he couldn't just stand there doing nothing. But before their fists could even collide, a deafening gunshot filled the arena. Blood splattered across the ground as the big man fell lifelessly. The drone, its barrel still smoking, had fired multiple shots to the buffed guy's skull. The machine's voice echoed flatly, announcing that any player who caused conflict outside of a designated match would be executed immediately. All the surrounding drones turned their guns toward the fallen body as a warning. Sunwoo froze, completely shaken. It was clear that human life meant nothing here. The entire system treated players like disposable entertainment. Before he could process what he had just witnessed, another sound drew his attention, a massive screen flickering to life in the air above. A man appeared on it, introducing himself as the creator of the tournament. His voice was calm but commanding. He congratulated the players for surviving the qualifier, explaining that the stimulant test round had been only a simple filter. From now on, eliminations would be constant, and being eliminated meant permanent removal from all future matches. Then he revealed the true reason everyone was there, the grand prize of 10 billion won. The crowd erupted in wild cheers. Sunwoo, however, remained silent. To him, the money only represented one thing, his father's surgery and his family's chance at living normally again. He clenched his fists, determination settling in. The creator continued that only one winner would receive the full amount, but reaching the top 16 would also earn a fighter 5% of the total VIP bets. The number of VIP spectators was then shown, causing several players to shout in excitement and vow to claim the rewards. He explained further that each participant would have a personal drone channel that streamed their every move to VIP viewers. The more attention they received, the more money they would earn. The system encouraged them to stand out, to perform, to entertain, to survive. Afterward, the players were told they could now select their private rooms, and anyone with questions could rely on their assigned drones for guidance. As doors began to open, players quickly discussed their strategies. Some planned to share rooms with stronger fighters to attract more viewers and betting attention. Others wanted to showcase flashy moves to boost their popularity. Sunwoo, on the other hand, found himself standing alone, realizing that even getting a room wouldn't be easy. The man who had helped him earlier walked up, wrapping an arm around his shoulder and assuring him that he would keep him safe until the main matches began. Sunwoo looked down at the man's arm, noticing the burn scars from earlier. He was about to respond when his eyes caught sight of another fighter, a blonde man whose face stirred a faint memory in him. But before he could recall where he had seen him, the muscular man pointed toward an empty room and suggested they go there. Still unsure of the man's intentions but unwilling to argue, Sunwoo hesitated. The thought of sharing a space in this place made him uneasy, yet danger surrounded him no matter where he went. Seeing his hesitation, the man turned back and asked why he was standing still. Sunwoo quietly agreed and followed. As the two walked together toward their assigned room, whispers filled the air. Some players mocked them, saying their view count would be the lowest. Others bragged that they would instead stay near top-ranking fighters to boost their exposure. Many still believed that pairing with a weakling would only drag them down. Inside, one of the rooms that looked more like the entrance to hell, the atmosphere was just as dangerous as its appearance. The fighters inside were huge, muscular, and radiated hostility. Among them, a blonde-haired boy walked in, noticeably smaller in size, but carrying an air that made everyone pause. He quietly closed the door behind him, then pointed toward a spot in the corner, saying that it looked good for him. The others exchanged uncertain looks until he ordered them to move aside. His bold tone left them stunned. One of the men, clearly offended, stood up with a mocking grin. He warned that the cameras hadn't even started recording yet, and this kid was already asking for trouble. The man raised his hand high, laughing as he prepared to swing. But before he could move another inch, the blonde boy stepped forward with frightening speed. Using just 2 fingers, he struck the man's neck vein. Blood instantly gushed out as the large fighter's body twisted before collapsing to the ground lifeless. The sudden and clean kill froze everyone else in the room. The boy glanced at them calmly, asking if anyone else had something to say. No one responded. The rest stood stiff and silent, like frightened rabbits. Satisfied, he told them to stay quiet, then casually licked the blood off his fingers, muttering that the person he really wanted to fight was someone else. This is a 19-year-old boy, Han Min-soo. The next morning, far away from that grim room, a sleek car sped along the highway. Inside, Min-sok was driving, while his boss sat in the back seat. Min-sok reported that there was intelligence suggesting the vice president would be teaming up again with Choi Ma-chun, the former champion of the previous season. Yeon-woo, already irritated, muttered that it was an obvious choice, though their only option this time was a high school student. Min-sok then mentioned that if Kang Sunwoo could make it into the top 16, he would undergo another round of stimulant testing. Confidently, he explained that with Sun Wu's unique body, the effects would likely be extraordinary. His bones, already 10 times denser than an average person's, would react stronger than anyone else's. His expression shifted as he realized what that meant. If Sun Wu takes stimulants in the next phase, something beyond human limits might be born. Yeonwoo clicked his tongue, commenting that competing for strong fighters was becoming a nuisance, though he admitted he didn't want other organizations to get their hands on him. Min-seok, however, remained relaxed. He assured his boss that it wasn't a concern for now since the 5-person room Sun Wu had joined had the lowest viewership in the entire stimulant test round. That detail made Yeonwoo look even more surprised. As their car crossed the bridge, the scene shifted back to the underground arena, where Sun Wu was being led to his assigned team room. The man walking with him explained a few basics about the team setup. He pointed out that getting noticed here would be difficult since the audience only cared about fighters who were expected to win. Then he gestured toward a woman in the corner and introduced her. She was Amanda Groch, 23 years old, skilled in jiu-jitsu, but not considered a strong contender. Next, he pointed at a short man standing nearby, a blonde named Kim Minho, 25 years old, trained in boxing. Finally, his gaze turned toward a strange-looking man, muttering to himself while trying to touch his elbow with his tongue. He introduced him as Menon, 28 years old. Menon didn't even notice the introduction, and kept mumbling the same phrase repeatedly, asking for help while stretching awkwardly. Just then, a group of drones flew into the room, their lights flickering as recording began. The man looked at one of them and noted that the guidance machine was now live. He explained that the more attention they attracted, the more money they would earn. To demonstrate, he suddenly leaped forward and balanced his entire body on one arm before starting a set of push-ups, moving rhythmically. Sun Wu scratched his head, unimpressed by the display. When he looked toward Amanda, she stood up silently and pointed her finger at the floor. With a sudden jab, she pierced through the surface, leaving Sun Wu wide-eyed. Then she lifted her entire body off the ground, balancing solely on that one finger. It was beyond impressive, even compared to the old man's feat earlier. Sun Wu stared in disbelief, trying to process what he was seeing. Meanwhile, Minho took a ready stance, saying that only fools showed off their strength. Sun Wu's curiosity grew, as Minho dashed to the far end of the room in the blink of an eye before instantly returning to his spot. His movements were so fast that Sun Wu barely registered them. Minho kept repeating the motion, each time faster than before, leaving Sun Wu silently amazed by his speed. On the other side, Menon kept muttering nonsense, his throat tightening as he choked on his own breath while still trying to reach his elbow. Sun Wu stood there sweating, realizing that this room was filled with all sorts of strange people, strength junkies, speed maniacs, and total weirdos. He began to regret his decision to join this group, unsure what any of their goals were or how he was supposed to survive among them. Before he could think further, the door suddenly slammed shut. A large screen flickered to life, displaying the tournament brackets. The 124 fighters had been divided into their respective rounds. Sun Wu looked up at the chart and froze. When he saw his next opponent, it was a fighter named Kai. Elsewhere, inside a high-rise office, Yeonwoo leaned back in his chair while watching the updated tournament listings. He asked Min-seok if that Kai fellow was truly as strong as rumored. Min-seok adjusted his glasses and confirmed that Kai had never lost a match. He explained that Kai specialized in a martial art known as Lethwei, a form even more brutal than Muay Thai. Yeonwoo looked intrigued, recalling that Muay Thai already allowed dangerous strikes like elbows and knees. Min-seok clarified that Lethwei went far beyond that. Fighters in Lethwei didn't wear gloves and were allowed to use headbutts, targeting the opponent's face and skull with the forehead, the hardest bone in the human body, making it lethally effective. That was precisely why it was banned in most tournaments. He continued, saying that Lethwei also permitted attacks on the back of the neck and spine, often leaving victims permanently disabled or dead. It was the most savage form of combat known. Kai is a 28-year-old martial artist who had fought not only professionally, but also for various underground organizations. Regular fighting circles no longer satisfied him, so he had sought out the most dangerous fighters he could find, gaining a notorious reputation. Yeonwoo finally asked if Sun Wu stood any chance against someone like him. Min-seok smiled faintly, saying that he was curious about that too. Until now, Sun Wu had only fought thugs and untrained fighters like Black Bear. This time, he would be facing a real martial artist, a professional killer in the ring. Inside the fighting arena's resting chamber, the examination pod slowly hissed open. From within, Sun Wu sat up, blinking as the light hit his face. His mind still foggy, he wondered how long he had been asleep. As he flexed his fingers and rolled his shoulders, a sudden lightness spread through his body. It was strange, he felt weightless, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off him. He turned his wrist a few times, studying the movement carefully. Something about it felt off, not weak, but sharper, more responsive. Then it struck him. This sensation, he had felt it once before. His eyes drifted to his palms, tracing the faint scars that had long healed. Memories of his battle with the man known as Black Bear flashed in his mind. The exhaustion, the near-death struggle, and then that same eerie lightness afterward. It wasn't an illusion. Every time he reached his physical limit, something inside him evolved. From behind another pod, an older man emerged, the uncle who had fought beside him earlier. Seeing Sunwoo awake, he looked mildly surprised, though his expression remained composed. He ran a hand across his recently healed arm, flexing it once, and then gave a small smile. His tone carried the weight of experience as he explained that when muscles are pushed beyond their limit and recover without lasting damage, they naturally rebuild stronger than before. Sunwoo stared at him silently, processing his words. The man continued, mentioning that he was sure Sunwoo had never pushed himself that far before. Inside, Sunwoo agreed the battle with Black Bear had truly forced him past every boundary, farther than he had ever gone. Without realizing it, he had reached a point of transformation. The uncle's gaze then shifted to Sunwoo's body, noting how quickly his wounds had healed. It was far from ordinary. He wondered aloud whether Sunwoo had used some kind of recovery stimulant. But Sunwoo dismissed it. That wasn't the point. What he really wanted to know had nothing to do with drugs or healing. He turned serious, asking the question that had lingered in his mind since the day before: why had the man risked his life to protect him? The older man fell quiet, his eyes lowering toward the ground. For a moment, the room filled with silence. Then, with a slow breath, he admitted that Sunwoo reminded him of his son. That answer caught Sunwoo off guard. The man explained that if he had been a better father, his own son wouldn't have fallen into debt with loan sharks. The realization clicked, so this man was here, fighting, risking his life, all to pay off that debt. His voice grew heavier as he confessed that every time he looked at Sunwoo, he saw the son he had failed, the one he couldn't protect, the one he abandoned. He couldn't just stand by and watch someone else suffer the same way. Sunwoo's expression hardened. His tone turned sharp as he told the man to stop wasting time on guilt. That startled the uncle for a moment, but Sunwoo continued firmly, saying that if he wanted to make things right, he had to live, not die trying. Only by staying alive could he ever take care of his son. The uncle stared at him for a long second, then suddenly gritted his teeth, caught between offense and belief. He wrapped a muscular arm around Sunwoo's neck playfully, muttering that if the kid dared to say such things again, he'd swallow him whole. The sudden grip made Sunwoo stumble back in surprise, flustered and trying to clarify that it wasn't meant as an insult. Before the atmosphere could ease completely, a loud, ridiculous voice echoed from across the room. Both of them turned to see Menon and Lenting, who were busy arguing with the hovering drone near the TV. Menon was shouting in frustration, demanding to know why he wasn't placed in the main area. He started flailing his arms and making absurd claims about being special, even bragging that he could touch his elbow with his tongue. The drone circled away as he jumped and waved, trying to catch it, only to fail miserably each time. The others in the room watched in disbelief as Menon continued throwing a tantrum, muttering curses at the machine. Meanwhile, Lenting adjusted his glasses calmly, explaining that the matches with the most views were assigned to the main arena, while the rest were moved to the stimulant section. He noted, however, that there was one detail to remember. Except for Menon, everyone else present understood exactly what that meant. Menon, still distracted and stretching his tongue out like a lizard to reach the drone, looked ridiculous. Lenting sighed, clarifying that being in the main area wasn't just about popularity, it meant facing the strongest and most terrifying opponents. Sunwoo tilted his head slightly, confused by the reaction. To him, that didn't sound like bad news. In fact, it sounded like a chance, but the others looked at him as if he were insane. Lenting found his expression baffling, that faint curve of excitement at the idea of stronger opponents. To Sunwoo, the thought of a greater challenge wasn't something to fear. It was an opportunity, a stage where the entire world's eyes would be on them, and where true strength could be proven. Lenting muttered under his breath that he must be crazy to look forward to such a thing. Menon, still panting from his failed drone chase, finally added in with a half-laugh, half-sneer. He reminded them that the main arena wasn't just about attracting viewers, it was where 16 of the world's top VIPs would be watching. Those people weren't just spectators, they were superpowers that ruled industries, politics, and influence across the globe. Hearing that, Sunwoo's expression shifted slightly. The thought lingered in his mind. If the VIPs were attending, then perhaps the scouts would be there too. And if they were, maybe, just maybe, he could finally hear some news about his mother. Outside an abandoned warehouse, 3 cars were parked side by side near a massive container filled with burning coal. The air shimmered from the heat. Yeonwoo stepped out, narrowing his eyes in annoyance. He had expected to head toward the main area, not some filthy industrial zone. Minsok, busy checking his tablet, calmly explained that the location of the fighting arena was top secret, known only to the organizers. If they were meeting here, it meant the meeting itself was meant to stay hidden. Yeonwoo frowned but noticed Minseok's attention was fixed on his screen. Something was wrong. Minseok muttered that someone outside their group seemed to be watching Kang Sunwoo's channel. Yeonwoo's expression darkened. He asked sharply who could be following them, when a voice suddenly echoed nearby, a woman's voice, calm and confident. It was Cha Seung-yeon, a 19-year-old girl and the youngest heiress of Hosen Corporation. She smiled lightly as she approached, saying that she was simply interested in the boy named Kang Sunwoo. Yeonwoo's jaw tightened. He had been recently fired from the company, and seeing her again irritated him even more. He muttered that she was following him like a shadow. Minseok tried to ease the tension by suggesting that the young lady might be interested in his boss's work, but Yeonwoo cut him off, scoffing. He called her nothing more than an unwanted child born to some lower-class woman. Seung-yeon didn't flinch. Calmly walking closer, she replied that there was no need for such harsh words. She reminded them that she had dropped out of school to work for the company just like they had, then smiled, and added that thanks to them, she had discovered this fascinating place. Her casual tone only made Yeonwoo more suspicious. He told her coldly to stop interfering and leave while she still could. Before she could respond, a car suddenly rolled into the warehouse. A drone followed it closely, hovering above. From the vehicle, and several armed escorts stepped out, announcing that the guests would now be guided to the main arena. A short while later, Seung-yeon was told to remove her blindfold. When she did, the brightness of the scene before her made her squint. A massive transparent window stretched before her, revealing a vast underground arena below. The floor gleamed under bright lights, and the air vibrated faintly with sound. A bodyguard beside her explained that the structure beneath them was the fighting arena, and that the director had arrived in one of the 16 VIP rooms. Seung-yeon's lips curved into a confident smile as she muttered that this new playground would be interesting. Across from her, Yeonwoo sat inside one of the viewing rooms, spinning slowly in his chair while observing the setup. He admitted that the place was much larger and more advanced than he had imagined. Minseok, still glued to his tablet, added that according to the schedule, once the current match finished, the next fight, Room 10, where Kang Sunwoo was assigned, would begin. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from below, making Yeonwoo flinch. On the large monitor in front of them, the view switched to another match. Han Min-soo was slamming a much larger opponent into the wall so hard that the entire section cracked. Yeonwoo's eyes widened in disbelief. Minseok identified him immediately, explaining that the fighter was Han Min-soo, a boy the same age as Kang Sunwoo. Yeonwoo muttered in surprise that he was still a high schooler, but Minseok clarified that he had already dropped out. The thought that two such powerful young fighters came from the same place made Yeonwoo uneasy. Moments later, the drone hovering above announced that the matches in rooms 9 and 20 had concluded. The next round, featuring rooms 10 and 3, was now beginning. As the door opened, Sunwoo and his teammates entered the arena. They immediately noticed the cracked floor, signs of the brutal fight that had taken place moments before. The old man on Sunwoo's team muttered that this round would be fierce. The drone declared that contestants from room 10 not yet scheduled to fight should remain on standby. Minho was the first to step forward, taking a deep breath to steady himself. The drone then confirmed that those who had completed their matches could leave the arena. Han Min-soo, already victorious, walked toward the exit. Just before leaving, he flicked his hair back casually, a movement Minho quietly noticed. Watching closely, the old man whispered that he hoped Minho would stay calm and not feel pressured. But suddenly, something whizzed past, striking the wall beside Sunwoo. He turned sharply, eyes wide, realizing that a stone had just pierced the surface with terrifying speed. Wondering where it came from, Minho's gaze narrowed as he replayed the moment in his head. He had seen it. Min-soo's flick had not been random. The guy had thrown the rock faster than the eye could follow. Minho clenched his jaw, realizing the connection. He thought to himself that even a small rock could cause that much damage at such velocity. Before he could dwell on it, Min-soo turned and looked straight at him. His tone was sharp, calling out Minho's arrogance. Minho replied casually, but Min-soo's glare only hardened. He said that arrogance came with a price, and suddenly took a defensive stance, hands raised and body tense. Everyone in the room froze as the tension spiked. Amanda whispered that nothing ever happened without reason. She and the old man exchanged glances, startled as she added that skilled fighters could sense even the faintest trace of killing intent. Min-soo, after holding Minho's gaze for a moment, simply walked past him and left through the main door. Minho stood there, clenching his fists, uneasy and frustrated. The brief encounter left him shaken. He muttered under his breath that Min-soo wasn't human. He was a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Before he could settle down, another voice broke the silence. A towering 31-year-old wrestler named Pice stood a few steps away, his massive frame casting a shadow across the room. Meanwhile, in one of the upper observation rooms, Hotel King President Yu Zian-go watched with a glass of wine in hand. He complained about the poor match quality, asking why such reckless fighters had been chosen. His butler, standing nearby, explained that wrestlers were exceptionally dangerous opponents. Their techniques could crush bones and suffocate enemies with sheer body weight. Once caught in a wrestler's grip, most fighters couldn't escape. Usion glanced back at the monitor as Paice stepped forward, preparing to fight. His muscles bulged under the arena lights, while Minho, much smaller in comparison, took a calm boxing stance. The drone hovering above announced the start of the match between Kim Minho and Paice. The wrestler spread his arms wide in a ready stance, sneering at Minho's posture. He charged in confidently, mocking that punches would never work against him. But before he could even complete his sentence, Minho's fist connected with his eye. A spray of blood followed as Paice stumbled backward, clutching his face in pain. In just 1 second of match, his left eye was gone. Minho exhaled sharply, lowering his hand. His middle finger, slightly bent forward, he had used it like a natural blade. Paice tried to calm himself, muttering that he could still fight with one eye. Minho gave his opponent no time to recover, his movements turning sharp, fluid, and unpredictable as he darted across the arena with relentless precision, refusing to slow down even for a breath. Paice's remaining eye widened in disbelief as he struggled to track those fast motions. Without hesitation, Minho shifted direction mid-step, feinting to the right before slamming a powerful punch straight into the center of Paice's face, making blood spray across the air. As the man growled in anger and swung violently, Minho instantly ducked beneath his reach, sliding out of danger before counterattacking with several precise hits aimed at his body's vital points, each strike landing harder than the last until Paice staggered, barely able to stay balanced. His vision blurred rapidly, and the blood dripping down his face blinded his last working eye, leaving him swaying unsteadily while the old man watched in shock, thinking the match might already be over. But Amanda, calm and composed, noticed something the others missed. Paice hadn't lost yet. Even without sight, he had started catching on to Minho's rhythm, his body instinctively reading the pattern of movement. Her realization came true in the next moment when Minho lunged again, his fist cutting through the air with deadly speed. But Paice's hand shot up and blocked it perfectly without even opening his eyes. For a moment, Minho froze, feeling trapped, as if every direction around him was sealed, and no matter where he turned, the man's presence filled the entire space like an unbreakable cage. He quickly retreated a few steps, frowning in disbelief at how fast Paice had adapted, unable to comprehend how his rhythm had already been exposed. Holding his bleeding eye, Paice steadied his breathing, muttering to himself that he had completely adjusted to Minho's movements, his body trembling with strange excitement as goosebumps rippled across his arms and veins bulged beneath his skin. The old man noticed his growing tension, realizing that something dangerous was surfacing within him as a twisted grin spread across his bloodied face, his aura turning heavier and more menacing with each passing second. Suddenly, Paice closed both eyes entirely, a move that made no sense to Minho, who hesitated briefly before charging forward again, unwilling to give him time to prepare. His punch cut through the air, but before it could land, Paice's hand caught his fist with terrifying precision, the impact stopping him dead in his tracks as if he had been caught by steel chains. Even the hotel king and his butler were stunned into silence, their eyes fixed on the unbelievable scene unfolding before them, while Minho's body stiffened, realizing he was trapped. He tried to move sideways to escape, but Paice's other arm stretched to the exact spot he was about to shift into, anticipating his every move as if reading his mind. The next instant, Minho's entire body was lifted into the air like a rag doll before being slammed down brutally, the shockwave from the impact splitting cracks across the arena floor. The old man shouted in disbelief, watching the dust rise as the crowd gasped in shock, unable to believe the sheer power behind Paice's throw. Usion's expression turned from awe to excitement, intrigued by how Paice's reflexes seemed even sharper than before despite being blinded, while the butler calmly concluded that the man had awakened his primal fighting instincts. Minho coughed blood violently, his jaw trembling as he tried to breathe, but Peace stood above him with a bloody smile, thanking him mockingly for awakening that new power. Yet before his arrogance could settle, Minho reacted in a sudden blur, raising his arm and driving his fist directly into Paice's last functioning eye. The result was immediate. A violent burst of blood exploded from Paice's face as he screamed and stumbled backward, his body twitching uncontrollably while his blood pooled beneath him on the cracked arena floor. Usion's eyes widened in shock, realizing that Paice had now lost both eyes completely, while the old man let out a short laugh, realizing that Minho had cleverly used his moment of weakness to land the perfect strike. The butler muttered that Paice was now fully blind and the match should already be over, though Usion doubted whether Minho's last attack had been intentional or just a reflex from desperation. In the center of the arena, Minho lay motionless, his chest rising shallowly, while Amanda calmly stated that if he didn't wake soon, he would die right there on the spot. The words drew everyone's attention back to the ring, just as Paice's trembling figure started to rise again, his legs shaking but his posture steady, driven by sheer willpower rather than sight. Though his world had turned completely black, his other senses ignited to terrifying levels. He could smell the iron in the dust, hear the faint buzz of the drone, and even sense the rhythmic beat of Minho's weakened breathing. The faint pressure in the air, the vibrations through the cracked floor, even the tiniest change in temperature. He could feel everything, as though the world itself had become an extension of his body. A wicked smile crept onto his face as he realized that he could now fight without the need for sight at all, relying purely on instinct sharpened to its absolute limit. He began laughing uncontrollably, overcome by the madness and thrill of this newfound power, promising to return the favor to the one who had made him like this. Without hesitation, he leapt high into the air, aiming to crush Minho completely. In Minho's half-conscious state, his body wouldn't respond. It felt like he was sinking underwater. Faint voices echoed in his mind, memories of his brother, revenge, and the day he was invited to the tournament by the organization. He remembered the red card, the promise to find his brother's killer, and the voice calling for help. Back in the present, Pais's massive form descended like a meteor, his elbow striking down, but Minho suddenly opened his eyes. Time seemed to slow. He realized that Pais wasn't moving slower, it was him who had become faster. As the attack hit the ground, Minho had already moved, dodging the fatal blow by inches. Everyone watching was stunned. Pais, panting heavily, couldn't believe what had just happened. Minho, wiping blood from his mouth, muttered that while the man had been talking about instincts, he had been resting and was now fully recharged. Pais roared, anger boiling over, but Minho only steadied his stance again. Their next clash began, instantly punches, blocks, feints, and speed that blurred together. Despite his blindness, Pais matched every move. He could feel Minho's breathing, his movements, even the faintest tremor of muscle before a strike. Minho, realizing brute speed alone wouldn't work, decided to push himself to the limit. Gathering all his strength, he darted forward like a flash of light, aiming for a finishing blow. But before he could land it, he suddenly froze. His body stiffened as an illusion filled his vision. He saw his neck snapping under Pais's imaginary grip. His momentum broke, and he collapsed to the ground in confusion. Pais tilted his head, confused but amused. He asked mockingly why Minho had fallen on his own. Minho trembled as he stood up again, rubbing his neck in disbelief. His voice was shaky as he muttered that he was seeing illusions again. Pais smiled eerily, replying that if he had attacked a moment longer, he would have crushed his neck for real, and that Minho should consider himself lucky to still be breathing. The match continued with growing intensity. From the observation deck, one of the spectators muttered in disbelief that Kim Minho's speed was completely ineffective. It was as if Pais could predict every single move before it even happened. But suddenly, Minho's movements shifted. Instead of darting around at lightning pace, he began performing light jumps and retreats with normal footwork. The man watching frowned in confusion. Minho continued circling his opponent, moving in and out as if testing him, muttering internally about his limited options. If he kept attacking with ordinary speed, there was no way he could win. Then, he finally struck again. The moment Old Man tried to warn him to stop, Minho's fist connected cleanly with his face. No block, no counter. Before Pais could grab him, Minho swiftly pulled back and widened the distance. Pais's eyes went wide. He couldn't understand it. The attack had landed cleanly before he even reacted. Minho suddenly burst into motion, running around him in a tight circle so fast that it looked like he was trapping Pais inside an invisible cage. He refused to stop, his movements relentless. Though exhaustion weighed on his body, he continued to push himself, forcing Pais to lose track of his rhythm. The old man, observing from the side, placed a hand on his forehead, deeply concerned. He couldn't understand why Minho was wasting his energy on such erratic movements. If he was already low on stamina, such excessive fakes would only drain him faster. But that effort was not in vain. Minho's next strike connected once more, hitting Pais square in the face. Another blow followed, leaving the larger man reeling. With his balance broken, Pais stumbled, and Minho capitalized immediately, landing a rapid series of punches, each one drawing more blood than the last. The old man stared in disbelief. The attacks were actually working. He couldn't comprehend how those fake movements made a difference. But Amanda, quietly analyzing, explained that the fake moves were precisely why Minho's attacks were effective. She elaborated that, since Pais had lost his vision, his brain unconsciously relied only on raw sensory input. Direct attacks were easier for him to predict, but Minho's unpredictable rhythm and false steps created confusion within those same enhanced senses. By making Pais think he could still see the attacks, Minho was deceiving his brain into misjudging distance and timing. Amanda continued observing, noting that Pais's newly heightened senses from the stimulant weren't fully synchronized yet. Minho, understanding this weakness, used fast, misleading body movements to overwhelm his opponent's brain. Within such a short time, he had already mastered how much Pais could sense and react to, and was exploiting that knowledge flawlessly. Minho's movements became smoother, his footwork constant and fluid. He ducked low, then launched a strong uppercut that smashed into Pais's chin, snapping his jaw upward and pressing his teeth together. In the VIP room above, Hotel King Yusion slammed his glass down in frustration, shouting that this couldn't be real, that he was watching his player lose to a kid. His butler calmly countered that it wasn't over yet, urging him to look closer at wrestler's face. Pais's grin was twisted and strange. Suddenly, he roared that he had caught Minho, wrapping his huge arms around the smaller fighter and lifting him off the ground. Laughing wildly, he shouted his victory, then slammed Minho backward with full force. The impact was brutal. Minho's head hit the arena floor with a shattering crack that echoed throughout the stadium. The audience froze in shock, and even Yusion and his butler stared wide-eyed. For a moment, it looked like Minho had been crushed completely. But then, Pais's expression changed. His vision, already dark, flickered with illusion. He felt like he had slammed Minho down, but what he saw wasn't real. His grin faded as confusion crept in. He whispered to himself that he had clearly grabbed him, yet Minho was standing a few steps away, completely unscathed. Sunwoo, watching from the sidelines, looked stunned. Why had Pais just thrown himself to the ground like that? Amanda calmly explained that Minho had been targeting Pais's brain the entire time. Each impact on his head caused his brain to shake slightly. The repeated shocks disrupted his sensory coordination, making his mind temporarily unable to distinguish reality from illusion. She said that in that brief window of distortion, Pais's senses had turned against him, making him believe he had captured Minho when he hadn't even touched him. Sunwoo was speechless. The strategy was incredible. He had never imagined Minho had such tactical precision. For the first time, he wondered if Minho might actually be stronger than him. Down below, Pais's entire body trembled violently. His vision was gone, his body was faltering, and disbelief filled his voice. He muttered weakly that Minho hadn't even used any stimulants. How could his natural senses surpass his own enhanced ones? He clenched his fists, frustrated, calling it unfair, before collapsing face first to the ground. The drone immediately descended to scan his condition, the camera focusing on his face. After a few seconds, it confirmed that Pais was no longer able to continue. The announcement echoed through the arena, declaring the winner of match Kim Minho. Minho let out a deep exhale, his chest heaving as the cheers erupted from the stands. Even those who had doubted him were now shouting in support. But in the VIP lounge, Yusion slammed his hand on the table, furious that his fighter had lost. Minho eventually dropped to his knees, still panting, whispering silently to himself, calling out to his brother in his thoughts. Meanwhile, in another observation room above, Sungyeon watched the entire fight replay on the screen. She leaned back in her chair, murmuring that this wasn't a human battle anymore. Her bodyguard beside her nodded, saying that this place was far more than an arena. He explained that it was a hidden world, where corporations fulfilled their deepest desires, from power and money to influence, and even discreet assassinations masked as competition. Everything here was orchestrated with precision, drugs, manipulation, and deception, all hidden behind entertainment. He added that for these powerful people, this was paradise, a place where the elite could satisfy every twisted ambition. Sungyeon finally understood why her third brother was so desperate to defeat their eldest here. Her bodyguard continued, saying that her brother must have chosen his fighter carefully, someone who knew this place inside out. Sungyeon's eyes sharpened as she muttered that they'd soon find out just how talented that fighter really was in the next round. Moments later, preparations began for the upcoming main match. This time, the spotlight turned to Kang Sunwoo. Inside the monitoring room, technicians replayed data logs while a man entered to report to the ward director that all 16 VVIPs had arrived at the hospital wing for observation. The director turned from his desk, asking if the reports were ready. The man nodded and explained that they had successfully observed secondary stimulation effects in the latest batch of sensory enhancement drugs. The short-term side effects had dropped by 20%, but the regenerative effect they aimed for still hadn't shown up. The director sighed, calling it a partial failure, but the scientist corrected him, saying that the drug's active phase had only just begun. They'd likely see results soon. He then pointed out that this was the first time any version of the drug had shown visible enhancement effects at all, and that the data might reveal clues about future regeneration capabilities. The director predicted that this might be connected to skin regeneration effects, and asked when the confirmation would come. The man replied that it wouldn't take long. The next fighter entering the main arena was one of the strongest subjects yet. That fighter, currently waiting in the resting area, was a massive man with red hair and a body built like a tank. On the other side, Sunwoo finished stretching his arms, preparing himself for what was ahead. The old man sitting beside him advised that if things got too difficult, he should just fall back and surrender. Sunwoo gave a faint smile, replying that he had no intention of losing. When asked if he wasn't nervous, he simply said he wasn't scared at all. The old man could only sigh, shaking his head. The drone above buzzed as it descended and announced clearly, "Fighter Kang Sunwoo enter the arena." Without hesitation, Sun Wu stepped forward and walked straight through the doors, heading into the battleground. As Sun Wu descended the long corridor toward the arena, a strange thought lingered in his mind. When was the last time he truly felt fear? Memories began to surface, moments from childhood flashing through his thoughts. He had been through countless accidents that could have easily ended in death, yet he always emerged unscathed. Even when blood ran down his face, it felt ordinary to him. Back then, he would cry out for his mother, but as the years passed, even the instinct to cry faded. Fear simply disappeared from him. People began to feel uneasy around that kind of emotionless calm. They would strike him, even hit him on the head with sticks, only for those sticks to shatter on impact. While his head bled, he felt no pain, and ironically, the ones trying to hurt him became the ones afraid. Now, as he stepped closer to the battlefield, there was only one thing left to worry about: his family's safety. The opponent in front of him didn't matter anymore. Across the arena, the other fighter entered, and the two faced each other as drones hovered around, recording every moment. From the waiting room, Yan Wu watched the broadcast with intense focus. He muttered that the match had finally begun, and asked Min-seok about Kai's abilities. Min-seok, still studying his tablet, replied that Kai was the first to be tested with the skin-enhancing drug, a development that piqued Yan Wu's curiosity. He questioned if such a drug even helped in combat. Min-seok replied that it did, and in fact, it made an enormous difference. Kai's skin had been toughened to such an extreme that normal human attacks couldn't even leave a mark. He added that just by touching Kai, an opponent's skin could tear, and their muscles could rip apart. Yan Wu grew uneasy. He muttered that the VIPs would surely be betting everything on someone like Kai. With a serious tone, he asked if it even made sense to bet on Kang Sun Wu against such an opponent. Min-seok refreshed the data. The numbers confirmed it. Nearly every single bet was placed on Kai. The difference was overwhelming. But then he froze. His tablet displayed an unexpected entry. Someone had just placed a massive bet, 100 million won, on Kang Sun Wu. Yan Wu stared in disbelief, demanding to know who would take such a risk. Elsewhere, Sung-yeon leaned back in her seat, calmly watching the screen. Her bodyguard asked if she was nervous. She replied that risk and profit always came together, and that if she didn't take bold chances, she would never surpass her brothers. Inside the arena, the match began. Both fighters stood motionless as the drone announced the start. Sun Wu eased into a defensive stance, determined to win no matter what. But Kai didn't move. He just stood there, relaxed, unbothered. Sun Wu hesitated, confused. He wondered if his opponent was mocking him. Kai finally took a step forward and said he wasn't the type to go around fighting kids. That brief moment of arrogance made Sun Wu grit his teeth. Kai raised his leg slightly, then warned him not to stand again after this strike. The kick landed straight in Sun Wu's gut, hurling him across the arena. From the stands, Yan Wu tensed up. One hit, and Sun Wu was already down. It looked like the end. Even the old man observing from above sighed, thinking it was over. But Minho, sitting beside him, disagreed. He said the boy wasn't beaten by pain, he simply noticed something different. Minho explained that Kai hadn't attacked seriously. He just wanted to intimidate him, to make Sun Wu stay down and give up voluntarily. It wasn't mercy, it was pride. Kai didn't want to be seen fighting a high schooler seriously. But Sun Wu wasn't planning to play dead. He slowly stood back up, brushing the dust from his clothes. Kai frowned, confused by his persistence. He gave him one last warning, but Sun Wu ignored it. That hint of defiance made Kai's expression harden. He stepped forward again, preparing another strike. But before his kick connected, Sun Wu blocked it with his own leg. The entire audience gasped. Even Sung-yeon leaned forward, eyes widening. Yan Wu and Min-seok were frozen, staring at the screen. Sun Wu immediately followed with another move, clamping down on Kai's leg. Kai grinned, surprised by his strength. He twisted his body, attempting a counterattack, but Sun Wu dodged and drove a solid hit to the back of Kai's head. The impact rang through the air like thunder. In the control rooms, both Yeon Woo and Sung-yeon's faces reflected the same shock. Sun Wu had actually landed a clean hit. For a moment, it looked like the impossible had happened. Kai straightened, his jaw tight. He admitted to himself that he had underestimated his opponent. As Sun Wu stood over him, the older fighter found himself kneeling. Sun Wu's eyes were calm, cold even, as he looked down at him. Kai had never felt humiliation like this. Moments later, Kai's grin returned. He raised his hands and placed them on Sun Wu's shoulders, muttering that if the boy wouldn't obey, he had no choice. The pressure that followed was crushing. It was as if Sun Wu's body was being nailed to the ground. His muscles refused to move, and Kai muttered coldly that this time, he would use 50% of his strength. Then his forehead slammed down into Sun Wu's face like a hammer. Blood burst from Sun Wu's nose as his body fell limp against the floor. Kai stepped back, muttering nervously that maybe he had used too much force. But then his eyes widened. Sun Wu's foot suddenly kicked up from the ground, landing squarely under his chin. The blow sent Kai stumbling backward. He flipped over, trying to regain his footing. His thoughts raced. How could Sun Wu still move after that? The boy's face was smeared with blood, his vision spinning, but he was still standing. Kai gathered his focus again, powering his next strike. His punch tore through the air, ripping open Sun Wu's shirt and leaving a trail of blood across his chest. The old man watching clenched his fists anxiously. Even a glancing hit from Kai could be fatal. Kai didn't stop. He lifted his knee and slammed it into Sun Wu's stomach, sending more blood flying. Then, without pause, he drove his elbow downward toward the boy's head. The impact echoed sharply through the arena, followed by a haunting silence. Sun Wu lay still on the ground, blood pooling beneath him. The old man in the stands couldn't bear to watch, but Manhwa exhaled quietly, saying that it wasn't over yet. Kai stood over Sun Wu's motionless body, staring in disbelief. Something about the scene didn't add up. He realized his final blow hadn't actually landed on the back of Sun Wu's head, it had hit the floor instead. He muttered that the boy must have twisted at the last moment. Even he couldn't understand it. Then, to his shock, Sun Wu began to move. He pushed himself up from the blood-soaked floor, his head completely unharmed. Yanwu and the others in the viewing rooms froze in disbelief. Kai could only watch as Sun Wu steadied himself again. His body trembled, but his eyes were sharp and unyielding. The older fighter told him to stop pushing himself, to just surrender. But Sun Wu only growled that the noise was irritating. Then he lifted his fists again and took a stance. Kai accepted the challenge, spreading his arms open in arrogance. He told Sun Wu to strike wherever he pleased, confident that none of it would matter. Sun Wu narrowed his eyes. If his opponent wanted to underestimate him, that would work to his advantage. Kai's mind wandered as he stared at the young fighter. He recalled his own path, years of brutal matches, countless victories, and endless bloodshed. He had fought assassins, gangsters, and underground champions. To him, this was no different. Another fight, another body. He had always believed that only battles risking life itself defined a true fighter. Sun Wu charged, his fist slamming into Kai's stomach with explosive force. The ground cracked under the pressure, but Kai didn't move an inch. He smirked, saying the attack was useless. For a brief second, he seemed unbeatable. Then his expression changed. Pain flickered through his body, and his legs trembled. Before he could react, Sun Wu punched again, harder this time. The shock was enough to push him backward. Kai was completely stunned. He didn't understand what had just happened. As Sun Wu continued his assault, Kai quickly raised his arm to defend, retaliating with sharp counterpunches that sliced across Sun Wu's chest. The boy gritted his teeth, his mind racing, trying to create distance. They circled each other in silence, tension building with each breath. Kai mocked him, asking how many more chances he would need. Sun Wu only smirked faintly, tearing away the remnants of his shirt. His teammates gasped when his body came into view, covered in blood, but clearly far stronger than before. He looked at Kai with calm defiance. Kai admitted grudgingly that the boy wasn't just another pawn being sent to die, but he warned him that everything happening now was by his own choice. Kai's muscles suddenly tensed, and a strange surge of power started to ripple around his arm. It was as if something inside him had been activated. Across from him, Sun Wu also began to feel a rush of excitement, his lips curving into a grin. Kai was finally serious now, using the full 100% of his body's strength. His arm began to emanate a strange energy that shimmered like scales beneath his skin. Watching him, Sun Wu's smile deepened, his expression a twisted mix of thrill and madness. From the viewing area, the old man stared at the scene in disbelief. The kid, Kang Sun Wu, was smiling even as danger surrounded him. Amanda, standing nearby, calmly explained that it wasn't fear on his face, it was excitement. The old man couldn't comprehend it. His opponent had increased his power to its maximum, preparing to crush him completely, and yet this boy looked thrilled. Amanda simply reasoned that to Sun Wu, the moment an opponent used their full strength against him meant recognition, a sign that his power was acknowledged. Her words left the old man stunned. Fighters like them truly were beyond comprehension. They placed themselves in mortal danger and still felt joy. Amanda added that every fighter carried this same madness, herself included. As a woman, she had faced countless disadvantages. Opponents had always gone easy on her, never fighting seriously. But the few times someone had recognized her as a true opponent, fought her with everything they had, those were the moments that made her come alive. She smiled faintly, remembering that thrill, while the old man only shook his head, unable to understand. Minho then spoke up, agreeing with her reasoning. He said he too understood that feeling. Being small, weak, and ignored all his life, constantly dismissed in every arena. But the moment an opponent acknowledged him, when their eyes showed surprise, when they felt his strength, that moment gave him purpose. Hearing him, the old man sighed, realizing he was surrounded by maniacs driven by pride and passion more than reason. Still, he couldn't deny that such madness often led to victory. On the arena floor, Sun Wu stood against a man twice his size, determined to fight until the very end. Kai's aura burned fiercely, energy rippling off him in waves as if his power had reached its absolute limit. Without hesitation, Sun Wu decided to strike first. He lunged forward and threw a lightning-fast punch that connected with Kai's bicep. The force of the hit was enough to make the ground rumble, and even the spectators gasped. But when the dust settled, it was clear that the blow hadn't even made a dent. Kai's skin was like reinforced, steel, smooth, hard, and unyielding. Before Sun Wu could retreat, Kai's other arm swung upward. Since the kid had attacked first, Kai intended to return the favor. His punch came crashing down, and with one powerful blow, Sun Wu's body was hurled across the floor, the tiles cracking beneath him. The shockwave spread through the arena, making the ground tremble. The old man clenched his jaw tightly as Sun Wu coughed blood, the sheer strength of that hit beyond imagination. Kai then lifted his leg and brought his knee down hard toward where Sun Wu had fallen. Dust erupted as the impact shook the entire floor, but when he looked closer, Sun Wu was gone. He had already rolled aside and pushed himself back up, still refusing to surrender. The old man's eyes widened at the sight, amazed that he could dodge such a strike. Manhwa, analyzing closely, added that he didn't truly dodge, he simply minimized the hit, taking it in a way that reduced the damage. Sun Wu turned slightly, feeling a sharp pain in his back. When he reached behind, his fingers brushed against a long, bleeding scratch. The wound ran deep, and warm blood trickled down, staining his side. He could feel the immense difference between them. Standing before Kai felt like standing at the base of a mountain, overwhelming, crushing, and impossible to climb. Kai looked down at him, mocking his efforts, but Sun Wu refused to back down. He steadied himself and crouched low, placing one hand on the ground as if to channel his strength. The thought that crossed his mind was simple. Whatever Kai could do, he could do better. He sprang up in an instant, driving his elbow downward in a counterattack. But Kai effortlessly tilted his head to dodge. Sun Wu landed in a kneeling stance, his breath ragged, and cursed under his breath. Kai, amused, began to move in excitement. The old man realized what was coming next, a headbutt. Both of them leapt forward at the same time, colliding head-on with a sickening thud that echoed through the entire arena. Blood dripped down from Sun Wu's forehead as he fell to his knees, trembling. Kai, however, remained standing, his head completely uninjured, his skin gleaming like polished iron. Kai looked down at the trembling boy and declared the fight over. To him, there was no way someone could keep standing after taking so many hits. But instead of collapsing in pain, Sun Wu started laughing faintly, his lips curling upward again. His laughter made Kai falter. The old man observing could barely process what he was seeing. That bloodied, exhausted boy was smiling as if this entire fight thrilled him. Kai decided it was time to finish things once and for all. His muscles tensed again, energy surging through him. But then, his eyes narrowed as something strange caught his attention. Steam began to rise from Sun Wu's body, thick, white vapors curling from his skin as if his flesh was being heated from the inside. The temperature in the arena seemed to shift. Even from the stands, the old man could see it. Sun Wu's body looked like molten metal, glowing faintly red beneath the skin. The air shimmered around him, blood and sweat evaporated instantly. Sun Wu slowly lifted his head, his eyes burning a deep crimson, his breathing calm but heavy. The memory of his younger self flashed across his mind. Back then, he had hated fighting. Every time he was dragged into conflict, people called him a monster. And maybe now, after all this, that was exactly what he had become. His thoughts twisted into something darker. Maybe this was what madness felt like. Maybe this was what he had been avoiding all along. A rush of exhilaration flooded his veins, and even as his body trembled, he couldn't stop smiling. He could no longer suppress the urge to fight. Kai moved suddenly, swinging his leg for another devastating kick, but Sun Wu's body reacted before his mind did. His eyes widened, and instinct took over. In a split second, he dodged the leg sweep with a full-body jump, flipping through the air and using both hands to grab the sides of Kai's head. His movements were lightning fast, too quick for Kai to comprehend. Before Kai could even counter, Sun Wu's forehead smashed directly into his. This time, the headbutt came from Sun Wu fierce, intentional, and powerful. The impact made Kai stagger backward, dazed, giving Sun Wu just enough space to flip to the other side. He immediately followed up with a swift horizontal kick that connected directly with Kai's ribs, launching him back until his body slammed against the arena wall. Kai leaned against it, gritting his teeth in shock. The movements were too fast, too clean, they didn't seem human. He barely had time to breathe before another blow came flying at him. Sun Wu wasn't giving him any room to recover. The barrage continued, fists and kicks flying from every direction. Kai tried to block, catching one of Sun Wu's punches mid-swing, but the momentum dragged his body forward. Sun Wu twisted his stance, using Kai's own weight against him, and slammed a punch into his stomach so hard that Kai's entire torso bent inward. The man was thrown backward again, his mouth hanging open in pain. He managed to land, his heels skidding along the floor to stay upright, his breath heavy and uneven. The disbelief in his eyes said it all. He couldn't understand what he was seeing. Was this boy even human? Was he on some kind of enhancer? But Sunwoo didn't stop. Despite his dizziness, he charged again, continuing his assault. Kai managed to grab one of his arms and kicked back in retaliation, but Sunwoo twisted his body, flipping behind him, and hit him several more times in the face, chest, and side. Kai's movements grew sluggish, his balance fading as frustration boiled inside him. The next moment, Sunwoo's fist came flying again, smashing straight into Kai's face with raw power. Blood splattered across the floor, and Kai's body went tumbling backward, sliding across the ground, leaving a long trail of blood. Half of his body dragged across the floor, leaving the surface scratched and soaked in red. From the stands, the old man stared, unable to speak. The blood loss looked fatal, but then Amanda pointed out something shocking. The blood wasn't Kai's, it was Sunwoo's own blood, dripping from his torn fist. Sunwoo stood still in the arena, his breathing ragged, his hand trembling and bleeding. Every inch of his body was covered in wounds, but his gaze stayed locked on his opponent. His head throbbed, and the pain in his arm felt unbearable. It was as if every muscle was tearing apart from the inside. Kai, however, still refused to go down. Struggling, he forced himself up, one knee shaking under his weight. From another viewing room, Seung-yeon watched in frustration. She couldn't believe Kai was still standing. Her bodyguard explained that the skin-enhancing drug had turned Kai's body into near-impenetrable armor. Kai's breathing grew louder and harsher. His body had reached its limit, yet his pride wouldn't let him yield. He thought about the pain spreading through his bones, the shock vibrating in every joint, but he couldn't accept defeat. He prepared for one last move, deciding to end the match. Sunwoo tried to meet him head-on, both of them launching punch after punch, their fists colliding mid-air in a brutal rhythm. Neither dodged anymore. It was pure endurance, pure stubbornness. Each punch hit like steel, striking steel. Sunwoo couldn't even feel his own fists anymore. His nerves were deadened by the pain, his vision blurred, his body swayed. Yet he didn't stop. Kai, on the other hand, began to lose sensation in his arms. His knuckles were numb, and every blow felt weaker than the last. Panic started to fill his mind. In desperation, Kai searched for an opening. Then he saw a small gap in Sunwoo's stance. He lowered his stance, raised his leg, and swung a devastating low kick toward Sunwoo's thigh. The impact was brutal. Sunwoo's body shook violently, his eyes flashing with pain as he struggled to stay upright. Kai quickly followed up with another attack, aiming for the shin. The sound that came next was sickening. Flesh tore, and a chunk of Sunwoo's skin was ripped open. The old man in the stands flinched, covering his mouth, horrified by the sound. Sunwoo stumbled and dropped to one knee. He stared at his torn leg, blood pouring out, muscles exposed. His thoughts raced, his body was failing him. He couldn't move. As he lifted his gaze, Kai was already preparing another kick, shouting that this next one would finish it. But before his foot could connect, a sharp cracking noise echoed through the arena. Kai froze mid-motion. His leg, the one he'd just used, had snapped in half. He fell immediately, his body collapsing awkwardly as pain tore through him. Using his arm to break the fall, he pressed against the floor, but the impact shattered his forearm too. For a few seconds, Kai's mind went blank. He couldn't comprehend what had happened. The pain was overwhelming. The audience was in complete silence. The entire arena stood still, frozen by the shocking reversal. Kai's face pressed against the ground, his body trembling and broken. In the control room, Yeonwoo and his assistant could only stare in disbelief. Seung-yeon, on the other hand, smiled faintly, proud of the outcome. Back on the floor, Sunwoo slowly forced himself up. His breathing was uneven, but his eyes were steady. Yeonwoo murmured in awe, realizing the scale of what he had just witnessed. Min-seok calmly analyzed that Kai's body, though seemingly unharmed from the outside, had taken enormous internal damage. The tight, impenetrable muscles had backfired, absorbing and amplifying the shock instead of dispersing it. Now, every joint, every limb, every bone in Kai's body had shattered from the accumulated impact. The drones descended, scanning the unconscious fighter. The system announced that Kai was unable to continue, and the victory officially went to contestant Kang Sunwoo. At that moment, Sunwoo lifted his face toward the lights, panting hard, then let out a loud, victorious scream that echoed across the arena. The old man, who had been speechless since the beginning, muttered that no ordinary human could endure such punishment. Minho, watching quietly, concluded that Kang Sunwoo was definitely hiding something deeper than anyone could imagine. Finally, Sunwoo's body loosened up, the adrenaline drained away, and he fell backward, lying flat on the cold floor. Despite the exhaustion, a faint smile appeared on his blood-stained face. In his heart, one thought echoed his mother. He silently told her to wait for him a little longer. From the security control room, the director watched every second of the fight. Recognizing Sunwoo's potential, he immediately asked his staff to confirm whether the boy had used any stimulants. The medic replied that, according to the records, Kang Sunwoo hadn't used any. The director nodded slowly, already forming a plan. Once the first round ended, they would conduct a physical test to confirm it. But before that, he ordered something else, a background investigation. With a cold glint in his eye, the director gave his command. They were to find everything about the boy's past, and most importantly, locate his parents. A rainy night settled over the hospital as Sunwoo's mother dozed off beside her husband's bed. The quiet patter of rain filled the room until she sensed a presence behind her. Thinking it was Sunwoo, she looked up and turned around, only to freeze. Two massive bodyguards stood side by side, facing her unconscious husband. A wave of panic crawled through her as she asked who they were. Meanwhile, back at the arena, staff rushed to carry Sunwoo away on a stretcher. His eyes were closed, breath heavy. Blood streaked across his body as they moved him toward recovery. In the VIP room, Yeonwoo watched with his chin resting on his hand, wondering aloud if Sunwoo could even win the next match after defeating Kai in such a state. Minseok reminded him that a physical examination would be conducted soon, and they could decide everything after confirmation. He said the more important part was the secret doping test he planned to run. Yeonwoo's eyes widened at that, surprised by Minseok's boldness. Minseok continued, saying that if Sunwoo somehow passed this second doping test, he would become the strongest candidate for the championship. Yeonwoo doubted the possibility of conducting a test in secret, since rules prevented forcing any player. Minseok pulled out a syringe and explained that the drug only detected doping traces in the body. Even if they tested him, it would not affect the match outcome, so it could remain hidden. Yeonwoo looked troubled. He brought up the worst-case scenario. If Sunwoo failed, he would be worthless. Minseok agreed and said it would be better to prepare a backup plan. In Sunwoo's recovery room, his body was placed inside a recovery pod. Outside, a spy approached silently, holding a familiar syringe. When the pod door opened, Sunwoo lay inside, sound asleep, and the experiment quietly began. Back in Yeonwoo's room, he tapped the table impatiently. One more win would place them within the top 16, he said. Minseok added that out of the 31 players with betting rankings, winning one more match would put them comfortably among the top contenders. Yeonwoo doubted anyone would place high bets on an injured Sunwoo. Minseok disagreed. He said Sunwoo had already won 2 matches without using doping. No one else in the arena had managed even one clean victory. Just entering the top 62 without using drugs had already attracted the attention of VIP clients. If Sunwoo won again, their profits would skyrocket. Yeonwoo grimaced. Without doping, Sunwoo might not win. He wondered aloud if now was the time they should secure the advantage with something guaranteed. Minseok adjusted his glasses and said Sunwoo must already know that if he wanted to win and find his parents, he would eventually rely on doping. Yeonwoo muttered about what would happen if Sunwoo's body could not handle it. Minseok answered calmly. The moment Sunwoo lost, he was prepared to cut his protection costs, hospital bills, and all support for Sunwoo's parents. Yeonwoo finally agreed. He said there was no way Sunwoo would hear anything about his parents anyway. Minseok told him to wait a little longer. Their agent would soon report the doping results. The boss looked at him again, impressed that a secretary from the arena could manage such a secret test. He says that he knew that he would never risk his life for him, and demanded his reason behind all this. Minseok said Yeonwoo's goal was to eliminate his brother and become owner of the Hoisin group. But his is different. His goal is to find greatest human being in this combat ward, and for that goal, he was willing to risk anything, even his life. Or, he added with a subtle smile, maybe someone else's life. Yeonwoo smirked, calling him a madman. The room door suddenly opened, and both men turned. The spy had returned with the sample, telling them it was time to leave. Minseok immediately asked for the results. The spy closed the door behind him and said the result was unexpected. Looking at them, he says the subject was non-reactive. Minseok froze, confused. Sunwoo truly had no response to doping. Yeonwoo's anger spiked. He ordered them to erase all evidence connected to Sunwoo and cut off his parents' aid. But suddenly he changed his mind, considering something faster. He muttered that making the parents disappear might be easier. Inside the recovery pod, Sunwoo, sleeping, his physical condition completely recovered. In the competition area's waiting lobby, the usual noise filled the air as dozens of competitors moved around. Minho stood among the crowd, looking over everyone and commenting that with this many people gathered, the 62 winners had clearly been decided. Uncle Park added that Kang Sunwoo still hadn't recovered yet and hadn't come back to the lobby. Off to the side, Amanda stretched her leg while warming up, casually saying that maybe this delay was a blessing in disguise. Matches would only continue once all athletes were fully healed, and it was a good chance for everyone to rest. Minho stared at her in disbelief, wondering how much further she intended to push her warm-up. Amanda continued stretching, saying Sunwoo had looked exhausted from the very beginning. Minho replied that for fighters like him and Sunwoo, getting injured here was practically guaranteed. He pointed out that both Amanda and Uncle Park had made it into the top 62 while staying remarkably calm, especially Park, whose right arm had transformed beyond anyone's imagination during fight. Uncle Park laughed awkwardly, admitting he didn't even know his arm could do that. Minho shifted his attention to Amanda again. He mentioned that her opponent had underestimated her because she was a woman and hadn't even taken the match seriously, yet she had taken him down with a single blow. Still curious, wondered aloud if she could teach him how to take down opponents like that. Amanda shot back sharply, saying that giving away her weaknesses before beating him was something she would never do. Minho froze, stunned by her bluntness. Before he could recover, Menon suddenly burst forward with a loud shout, demanding to know why he was being excluded. Minho jumped in surprise as Menon raised his hand proudly, bragging that the first winner had been none other than he himself. At that moment, the large screen in the lobby lit up with the administrator's image. He congratulated everyone for making it into the group of 62 and announced that one more win would earn the chance to enter the round of 16. He explained that in the next round, the winners would reach match 31, and from there, rankings would be determined by betting amounts before proceeding into the top 16. Simply entering the round of 16 and surviving would instantly earn a player 5% of the betting prize pool. The lobby erupted into chaos instantly, excitement exploding through the room. The administrator continued, encouraging the fighters to risk everything and show their full strength if they wanted higher betting stakes. He assured them that injuries weren't a concern, since this competition area hosted the largest medical facility available in country. Finally, he announced that it was time to reveal the match brackets. At the Hosen Group Tower, Yeonwoo leaned back in his chair and asked Minsok if they could secure another betting candidate besides Kang Sunwoo. Minsok stood at the desk, answering with full confidence. He pointed at the screen showing a competitor's portrait, saying the fighter looked ideal. Yeonwoo's expression tightened in surprise, and Minsok introduced the man on the screen as Ryo Ichika, Sunwoo's final round opponent. Inside Sunwoo's recovery room, the pod lid opened with a soft hiss. Sunwoo jolted awake instantly, breath sharp and shaky, instinctively calling for his mother. The moment passed, and reality settled in. He clutched his head, gasping as the dream faded, yet the voice still echoed in his memory. He was certain he had heard something earlier, something real. He remembered the staff member outside the pod, whispering into a tablet about him. Words surfaced clearly. If he does not react to doping, make his parents disappear. There is no way Kang Sunwoo will ever hear news about them anyway. That memory stabbed straight through him. He clenched his fists, thinking that he had to get out quickly before something terrible happened to his parents. Meanwhile, in the combat ward director's office, the director asked if Sunwoo's physical exam was complete. A man in a lab coat nodded and said there was something very unusual. The director straightened, waiting. The man explained that Sunwoo's bone density, something doping could never affect, was 10 times higher than a normal human's. The director could only let out a slow, stunned breath, but the man continued, saying the abnormalities did not end there. He pushed up his glasses and studied the tablet screen again. Sunwoo's physical restoration was too fast to classify as recovery. It resembled regeneration. The screen displayed detailed scans of Sunwoo's bones and internal structure, each frame more shocking than the last. Hearing this, the director froze in disbelief. The man added that Sunwoo might be the key their research teams had been chasing for years, the clue to human regeneration. The director remembered the earlier orders and asked if Sunwoo's parents had been secured. The man lowered his head apologetically. By the time they arrived, someone else had already taken them away. Back in the recovery room, Sunwoo stepped out of the pod, still trembling with urgency. He knew something terrible was already unfolding. He looked toward the door, thinking fast. There were no vents, no openings he could crawl through. His only option was the hallway. He grabbed the doorknob, muttering that he needed to find an exhaust fan outside the room. As he cracked the door open, a strange glow drifted in. A silhouette appeared, blocking the exit. He froze for a moment before recognizing the woman standing there. Her tone carried amused curiosity as she studied him up close. It was Cha Seung-gyeon. She offered a polite gesture, warmth in her expression. Sunwoo waved her aside immediately, desperate and in a rush, but she stood firm, blocking the doorway as if she owned it. She stated calmly that if he planned to look for his parents, there was no need. Sunwoo halted mid-breath, eyes widening at the implication. Then she added that she had already taken them away. His mind crashed for a moment, unable to process what she meant. Far across the tower, in the vice chairman's office, Yeonwoo heard Minseok report that someone else had already handled Sunwoo's parents. Yeonwoo demanded an explanation, and Minseok explained that it was likely the people from the combat treatment area, who usually removed troublesome elements before they caused problems. Yeonwoo looked pleased, saying their timing was perfect and saved him extra trouble. He asked if the next fighter had been approached yet. Minseok assured him that VIPs in the combat zone could summon any fighter they wanted, even in restricted areas. Some VIPs even paid extra just to wander around inside the monster-filled zone, though safety there was never guaranteed. Back in Sunwoo's room, Seung-yeon closed the door behind her. His shock turned into panic as he demanded to know what she meant about taking his parents. She quickly covered his mouth, signaling him to stay quiet. She warned him this was not the moment to try rescuing them directly. He pushed her hand away, voice sharp with anger and frustration. She explained that Yeonwoo was cutting all ties with him and intended to get rid of his family. The loan shark Sunwoo bankrupted was also hunting him. That combination alone was enough to doom anyone. She pointed out that she had come alone because she needed privacy to speak with him. From this moment onward, she told him to listen carefully if he wanted his parents safe. Sunwoo demanded to know who she was and what she truly wanted. Seungyeon calmly answered that she only wanted one thing, him. That stunned him completely. He questioned her intentions, but she continued, explaining her position. She was one of the 16 VIPs. She needed a reliable fighter. She added that although she was young, she had been one of the owners of the Hosen Group before internal family politics pushed her out. As the half-sister of Cha Yeonwoo, she had seen the damage caused by her second brother. He had kept siphoning money from their father's company, and she refused to watch any longer. Sunwoo snapped again, demanding what any of that had to do with taking his parents. She explained that she had been monitoring those brothers for a long time and noticed Yeonwoo's sudden obsession with Sunwoo. That pushed her to investigate further and visit his parents herself. She told him he was more talented than she expected, and she could not let Yeonwoo monopolize his genes, and that word struck him hard. She added that the forces targeting his parents had not stopped, and that running would not save them. His shoulders slumped with despair as he asked what he was supposed to do now. She replied firmly that only one path guaranteed survival for him and his family: victory. The word hit him like a wall. She explained that she planned to make a massive move inside the combat treatment zone to take down her two brothers. Once the second brother was ruined and locked away, he would no longer be a threat. As for the loan sharks, money would handle them easily. She reminded him that the combat treatment zone followed strict fair trade rules. Anything outside those rules would be resolved the harsh way this place preferred. Sunwoo glared suspiciously, realizing she was serious enough to risk her life for a deal with him. She added that when entering the round of 16, any fighter not selected by a VIP would be eliminated instantly. Sunwoo demanded how he was supposed to trust her and believe his parents were safe. She reminded him that communication devices were banned here, and proof could not be given. She said the only way he would believe her was through someone trusted enough to share his parents' deepest secrets about his genes and their past. He froze again, panic clawing up his throat. He demanded to know what she ultimately wanted, but the room door opened with a soft clang. A drone floated in to inspect the space. Seungyeon stepped closer, voice lowering to a whisper against his ear. She told him to remember her words. She would protect his parents at any cost. He was not allowed to run. The drone called for return time, and Seungyeon stepped away, leaving the room. Before disappearing, she told him to forget about everything else and focus on one task: win with her. Sunwoo stood there with clenched teeth, watching her silhouette fade down the hallway. The scene shifted to Combat Ward Dormitory Room 10, where Uncle Park stared at the ranking board with a proud grin, saying their prize rankings had gone up significantly. The board displayed Amanda at 19, Woosik Park at 22, Minho at 28, Menon at 45, and Sunwoo at 62. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully, muttering that Kang Sunwoo sat at the very bottom. Minho studied the board as well, thinking the injury and his trip to the recovery room must have heavily affected his ranking. No matter how impressive Sunwoo's fighting performance was, no one would confidently bet on a player who had returned injured. The room quieted for a moment before the door slid open with a mechanical hiss. A drone drifted inside and announced that player Kang Sunwoo had returned to Dormitory 10, and Uncle Park greeted him with open arms, surprised by how well he seemed to be standing. He commented on how healthy Sunwoo looked, but his words cut off when he saw the expression on Sunwoo's face. Sunwoo gritted his teeth, voice trembling with urgency, as he demanded to know how he could win without sustaining injuries. His determination shook the whole room. He insisted he had to reach the round of 16 at any cost. If he failed, his family would face consequences he refused to imagine. He begged them to tell him a way to survive the next fights, promising to do anything within his power. His voice echoed fiercely in the room. Uncle Park called his name with worry, but Sunwoo lowered his head, muttering that it was impossible after all. In that moment, Amanda interrupted sharply. She said, there was one answer: a special technique. Sunwoo and Uncle Park both turned to her instantly. She explained that fighters without a unique technique struggled to gain any real edge inside the arena, especially against monstrous opponents. She fixed her gaze on Sunwoo, asking what his specialty was. Sunwoo stumbled over his words, unable to answer. Uncle Park suddenly knelt, studying Sunwoo's leg with serious intent. Then he suggested a low kick executed with the shin bone. Sunwoo blinked, confused. The older man explained that in the fight against Kai, Sunwoo had controlled his footwork so precisely he even used his shin bone to block a trained opponent's low kick. Woosik demonstrated with a swift motion, saying modern low kicks had developed to the point where a single clean strike could bring down an opponent. He asked Sunwoo whether he wanted to master the low kick. Without hesitation, Sunwoo threw a straight kick forward. The sheer force cut through the air, producing a sharp whistling sound that startled Woosik. He burst into laughter, shocked and delighted, muttering that Sunwoo was on another level entirely. Before anyone could comment further, heavy rumbling noises traveled through the hallway. Uncle Park froze instantly, listening closely. The noise grew stronger, and they traced it to a closed room at the end of the hall. Inside that room, a man was throwing furious punches into the air. Each punch produced gusts of violent wind and shattered the tiles around him. That man was Ryo Ichika, ranked 15th, a dangerous Kudo fighter preparing for his next match. Back in room 10, Wusik told Sunwoo that if he could knock out opponents with kicks of that level, he would dramatically increase his survival rate in hand-to-hand combat. Advancing deeper into the rounds would become far safer, and the prize money would rise naturally along the way. Menon suddenly appeared behind Sunwoo, speaking in an eerie tone that made Sunwoo flinch. Menon leaned close, asking why they were acting like it was simple. Sunwoo jumped in surprise as Menon hovered near him, staring with unblinking eyes. Menon lifted his chin proudly, and claimed that everyone already knew Sunwoo's real special move. Sunwoo blinked in confusion, and Menon pointed at his forehead. He said it was the headbutt. With a twisted grin, he asked how many headbutts a champion could take. The fact that Sunwoo could fight normally after taking them proved how absurdly strong his skull was. Menon stuck out his tongue, struck a bizarre pose, and even leaned in to lick the top of Sunwoo's head in some deranged ritual. Sunwoo recoiled instantly, while Wusik stated that headbutts were powerful but dangerous, since the user absorbed the same damage. Fighting stronger opponents in this combat zone meant a high risk of brain damage. Menon shot back that the old man was speaking strangely. His attitude sharpened as he claimed that everyone here put their life on the line, and hesitation only guaranteed failure. Menon slashed his own throat with a gesture, stuck out his tongue again, and said that once someone faltered like that, they had already doomed themselves. Wusik ground his teeth, frustrated with Menon's insanity. But Menon continued with unsettling clarity. He said Sunwoo was worried about something else entirely. Sunwoo turned to him, confused, and Menon pointed at Wusik. He asked if Sunwoo had checked his next opponent. On the tournament bracket displayed on the wall, the matchup showed Han Min-soo, ranked 9th, facing Park Wusik. At the same time, in the management area's security room, the director reviewed stimulant test data on his tablet. The reaction to doping from this particular fighter was terrifying. The detailed profile belonged to Han Min-soo. The director praised the decision to bring him in, arms spread wide as he admired the massive lab behind him. The lab contained biological test chambers where engineered fighters floated in liquid tanks. He glanced at a man standing beside him, Min-soo's father. The man bowed deeply, thanking the director with a heavy voice. His expression was pained, haunted by memories. He recalled his past as an ordinary doctor with a small, peaceful life. He remembered coming home late, calling out to his family with a tired smile. But inside, he found Min-soo collapsed on the floor, frail and skeletal due to a rare muscular atrophy disease. The boy whispered that he had fallen and could not get back up. The memory still brought tears to his eyes. He remembered the day the director contacted him, a stranger offering a lifeline. He remembered walking through a hidden passage beneath a hospital morgue and entering a secret laboratory. Inside, rows of enormous tubes held human test subjects suspended in liquid, fed through breathing apparatuses. Around the director were documents signed by famous scientists and businessmen, all secretly participating. He realized then that he did not care why any of them were doing this. He only cared that the research results showed hope. His son could be saved. The director approached him that day and gently extended a hand, offering Min-soo a place in the project. The father remembered the overwhelming emotion, the desperate hope, and the painful truth that he had no other option. He ran home, only to find his son attempting to end his life. He pulled the boy down, hugged him tightly, and listened to him beg to die because the pain had become unbearable. The father broke entirely in that moment. He felt he had no choice but to place Min-soo into the experiment. It was the only path left to save him. Yet now, Min-soo had turned into something monstrous. The present-day Min-soo stood before the arena gate, transformed. A drone hovered above, calling the fighter to enter. Min-soo walked toward the battlefield with cold precision. His eyes, darkened into unnatural black irises, gleamed with murderous intent. Waiting inside the arena was Uncle Park Wusik. He warmed up his wrist, posture steady, expression hard and focused. He took one breath and announced the beginning of their brutal match. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena, declaring the next match as Park Wusik, ranked 22, facing Han Min-soo, ranked 9. A drone drifted above them, giving the formal signal for the match to begin. The instant the command ended, Min-soo exploded forward like a bolt of lightning. Wusik barely raised his guard before Min-soo's fingers struck directly into the weak point beneath his shoulder blade. A single firm press pierced skin, drawing blood. The vicious, calculated strike caught Wusik completely off guard. He hissed sharply, shocked that a single finger could inflict that kind of pain. The spectators reacted immediately, stiffening in disbelief. Minho grimaced from the stands, recognizing the technique instantly. In close combat, a fighter using dagger techniques with bare fingers was a nightmare. He muttered inwardly that Uncle Wusik surely never saw this coming. Min-soo suddenly realized his finger refused to pull free. He clicked his tongue in annoyance, wondering how Wusik was clamping down on his finger with nothing but muscle strength. Wusik spoke in a cold, oddly calm tone, telling him he was standing too close for comfort. His massive arm rose, palm spread like a giant slab of iron, and Minsu's face tightened in unease. With a single brutal motion, Wusik swung his entire hand toward Minsu's skull. Minsu had no time to retreat or block, and the older man's sheer size overwhelmed him. Wusik slammed his fist into the floor, intending to smash Minsu's head down with full force. The tiles shattered like thin ice beneath the impact. Minsu barely rolled away in time, gasping as a gust of wind blasted him backward several meters. When the shockwave faded, both men paused, sizing each other up. Minsu breathed heavily, drenched in sweat, stunned by the old man's monstrous strength. He wondered how someone with such a deformed arm could produce that kind of destructive power. Wusik let out a cold smirk, mocking Minsu for trying to use dagger techniques in bare-hand combat. He said now it was his turn to return the favor. He shifted into his signature Krav Maga stance, arms angled like a shield. Yun Wu watched from the VIP area, raising an eyebrow in interest. He admitted the person dealing with 9th-ranked Minsu this easily was unexpected. For a moment, he even considered whether Minsu had been overrated. Minsuk immediately stepped in, explaining that Park Wusik was a former bodyguard trained in Krav Maga. He continued elaborating, recounting its origins as a practical martial art made for survival, mixing techniques from across the world. It excelled in real fights where defeating the opponent quickly mattered more than form. Yan Wu frowned, thinking a martial art created for defense must be weak offensively. Minsuk corrected him, his tone sharpening, as he pointed out that some defensive forms could just as easily become lethal in close quarters. The dangerous glint in his expression said, "Enough." Back in the arena, Wusik lunged at full speed. His hands were shaped like blades, slicing through the air. His fingertips almost grazed Minsu's eyes. Minsu tilted his head aside smoothly, calling the attack slow, then raised 2 fingers in a deadly gesture. He aimed straight for Wusik's temple. Wusik felt the intent before the pain hit, wondering what kind of attack this was. The fingers stabbed into his temple, blood spraying instantly. His glasses flew off from the impact. Wusik retaliated with a sweeping forearm slash, but Minsu slipped away effortlessly. Wusik chased him, determined to catch him at any cost, while Minsu mocked him openly. He sneered at Wusik's giant arm, saying with a body that deformed, catching him would be impossible. Wusik abruptly planted both hands on the floor, commanding his damaged arm to lift one more time. He hauled his hulking frame upward, and launched himself at Minsu with terrifying speed. His giant hand briefly brushed Minsu's face, leaving a faint scratch along his cheek. He continued swinging, unleashing heavy strikes, but Minsu danced around the blows, darting out of range with mocking laughter. Then Minsu shot to Wusik's side. His raised arm had not lowered fully, leaving his ribs exposed. Minsu seized the opening, stabbing his fingers into Wusik's side repeatedly. The relentless precision created deep punctures that made Wusik's body lurch. Minsu taunted him, criticizing his sluggish attempts to defend vital areas. He moved like lightning, splitting into blurs around the older man, stabbing from all directions. Wusik's vision spun. He could no longer track the attacks. His mind slipped toward despair, thinking he could not keep up. Another strike tore open his side, blood spraying. The audience gasped at Minsu's precision and speed. Minho watched, pale and worried, wondering if this was truly the power of a rank 9 fighter. Wusik remained standing by sheer will, trembling violently, drenched in blood. Minsu mocked him again, impressed he could still hold a stance. He noted Wusik no longer bothered with dagger techniques, relying only on his widened guard. Minsu sneered, analyzing him aloud. He said Wusik was trying to widen his defense, planning to grab him if he got too close. He raised his 2 deadly fingers again, dashing forward for the finishing strike. His fingers sliced across Wusik's torso, sending a shockwave of pain through him. Wusik clenched his remaining fist, pressing it into the center of his own chest, creating a deep impression. Minho stared from above, confused, thinking Wusik had struck himself. Amanda corrected him calmly. Wusik had aimed at Minsu's attacking fingers, not his own chest. Her words hit just as the sound of breaking bone echoed across the arena. Minsu's fingers snapped sharply. He recoiled, pain twisting his face. Wusik surged forward, landing a massive punch to Minsu's stomach. The hit was so powerful that it blasted Minsu across the arena and cracked the wall he crashed into. Blood spilled from Minsu's mouth. Wusik staggered too, blood dripping from his lips. He knew this opponent would not fall easily. He told himself he needed one more strike, but his right arm barely responded. His muscles were shredded. He forced his body to move, dragging all remaining strength together. He lunged, preparing the final punch, promising himself this one blow would land no matter what. Just as he committed, a sharp shock pierced his entire system. His body collapsed mid-motion. Sunwoo yelled from the observation area, begging him to hold on, But Wusuk's body no longer obeyed him. His arm stayed limp. His vision blurred as he cursed the blood loss draining him dry. His eyelids grew heavy. His consciousness faded. In that darkness, he heard his son's voice apologizing. He reminded himself the match was not over, that he had to stand, that he had to win for his son. But as he forced his eyes open, Minsu appeared right before him, fingers aimed at his eyes. Wusuk's heart dropped in horror. Minsu snarled that he was right-handed, and drove his remaining fingers deep into the older man's chest. Wusuk's body locked in agony. Sunwoo screamed his name repeatedly from above. With the last of his instinct, Wusuk raised his palm, blocking the fatal blow aimed at his heart. Even then, Minsu pushed forward, driving his fingers deeper, until they pierced clean through Wusuk's palm. Wusuk collapsed, defeated. Sunwoo froze, his heart sinking. Minsu turned toward the viewing glass, spotting Sunwoo among the teammates. He laughed viciously, and called out Sunwoo's name with twisted pleasure. Sunwoo felt like lightning hit him. Minsu blamed him, claiming the old man died because of a useless kid like him. He ripped his fingers out of Wusuk's palm, leaving a gaping hole. Sunwoo's rage ignited instantly. Images of training with Wusuk flooded his mind. He remembered Wusuk resting an arm around his neck after practice, complaining about exhaustion while Sunwoo begged to continue training. Wusuk had laughed warmly at him, saying if he had a son like Sunwoo, maybe things would have been different. Sunwoo had wondered then if bonding with his own father could ever feel that way. Wusuk had clapped his shoulder, telling him not to worry, that fathers did not die easily when their sons needed them. That man had smiled with genuine warmth and hope. Now that same man lay collapsed on the cold arena floor. The drone hovered over Wusuk, analyzing him before announcing the end of the match and declaring victory for Han Minsu. Minsu celebrated by planting his foot on Wusuk's face and laughing wildly, calling the arena interesting. Sunwoo watched in pure fury as veins bulged across his forehead. Without hesitation, he launched himself from the viewing area and dropped straight onto the arena floor. His sudden appearance thrilled Minsu. The drones converged but held their fire, sensing there was no direct attack yet. Minho realized this and understood the drones would not shoot as long as Sunwoo did not fight directly. Sunwoo stood face to face with Minsu, his fury boiling, warning him to remove his foot. Minsu kept the foot pressed down, daring him to make him move. Sunwoo tensed, ready to strike. The drones armed their weapons instantly. Sunwoo swung his fist, roaring for Minsu to get off, while Minsu raised his bloody fingers. Seeing disaster coming, Minho rushed forward to stop the clash, but Menon blurred past him like a shadow. Menon wrapped Sunwoo in a tight chokehold, stopping his charge. Sunwoo struggled violently, demanding to be released. Menon whispered that he had to use the headbutt he learned before dying. Sunwoo fought against the hold, cursing through clenched teeth. Minho slid in and tripped him, grabbing his legs tightly. The two held him down on the floor, while Minsu watched with twisted amusement. Menon tightened his grip, telling Sunwoo to sleep for a moment. Sunwoo's eyelids grew heavy from the lack of air. His mind spat out one final curse before darkness washed over him. Memories of Wusuk flooded Sunwoo's mind again, pulling him back to the moment when Wusuk had once asked him in a serious tone if something ever happened to him, Sunwoo should look after his son. The unexpected request had surprised him, and the older man had explained with a hint of embarrassment that he simply wanted his son to have a friend who could guide him and stop him from drifting too far off the right path. Sunwoo, wiping sweat with a towel at that time, had responded without hesitation, which in turn had surprised Wusuk even more. Sunwoo had added with honest sincerity that he still had a lot he wanted to learn from Wusuk, and being close to his son would only give him more chances to learn from the older man. The reaction had left Wusuk stunned for a moment before a bright smile spread across his face. He had ruffled Sunwoo's hair affectionately, amused that the kid still seemed ready to boss him around even after they got out. Back in the harsh present, Wusuk lay unconscious beneath his enemy's foot, while Sunwoo, having also lost consciousness, remained motionless on the arena floor where his teammates had dragged him. Minsu clicked his tongue with contempt, sneering at the scene like it was a pathetic display. Amanda immediately cut through the tension with a cold tone, pointing out that Minsu had already received all the attention he wanted from Kang Sunwoo and demanding that he leave. Her sharp attitude made Minsu glance at her. She stepped in with a firm stance, warning him with deadly seriousness. When she pointed at the recording drone hovering overhead, her threat carried a chilling clarity, leaving Minsu momentarily startled. Faced with her unwavering resolve, he stepped back while forcing a laugh, claiming he had already asked them to wait. He eventually lifted his foot off Wusuk's head and turned to leave, throwing out one final threat that he planned to kill all of them eventually, before walking toward the gate. As soon as he disappeared from the arena floor, Amanda rushed to Wusuk, kneeling down to check his condition. Relief washed over her when she realized he was still alive. She raised her hand immediately, signaling the medical team waiting outside and urging them to hurry. Her eyes lingered on the large hole punctured through his left hand, noting that the damaged hand had actually saved him. The same hand that had earlier been stabbed in the fingers was used to avoid a fatal weak point with surprising skill. The medical staff quickly placed his unconscious body on a stretcher and carried him away from the arena. In the VIP area, Yeon-woo sat stunned by what he had witnessed. In his mind, Han Min-soo appeared to be nothing less than a monster, someone capable of using his fingers like razor-sharp weapons. Min-seok adjusted his glasses and explained that Min-soo's doping was extremely special. Most types of doping simply enhanced muscle strength and size, but Min-soo's enhancements affected the connective tissues surrounding his bones, including tendons, ligaments, and muscle sheets, which had grown beyond normal limits. His adaptability and development surpassed even Kang Sun-woo, who possessed only specially enhanced bones. Hearing this, Yeon-woo immediately felt the need to recruit Min-soo to their side, but the secretary quickly reminded him that Han Min-soo was directly managed under the director, making any attempt to approach him extremely difficult. This only made Yeon-woo feel more frustrated and regretful. Min-seok tried to ease his concerns, reminding him that there were still many strong fighters left, including the next one in the upcoming match. He rested his chin on his hand, recalling that the next fighter was a woman known for using capoeira. The secretary confirmed the identity of the fighter, and Yeon-woo reacted with irritation, believing capoeira to be nothing more than flashy dance moves with little combat value. Min-seok elaborated further, clarifying that its dance-like appearance was never intended for entertainment. During the era when Portugal occupied Brazil, African slaves brought for forced labor collectively created capoeira as a means of self-defense and a way to resist oppression. The movements were disguised as dance to deceive guards and overseers, but the martial art carried deep resentment and a strong spirit of resistance. After Brazil gained independence, its misuse in criminal activities became so widespread that the government eventually banned it for a period. Because of its origin, intent, and evolution, capoeira was not simply practical in combat, but considered extremely dangerous. Meanwhile, on the arena floor, the next match was about to begin. Amanda Grouch slowly walked onto the floor, moving with a calm confidence. She was currently ranked 19th and specialized in capoeira. Above the arena, the supervising drone slowly flew toward the center position, announcing that all fighters for the next match were ready to enter the arena. Amanda glanced toward the opposite side and carefully observed her opponent, a man with straw blonde hair. This was Go Hyuk-soo, currently ranked 10th, specializing in mixed martial arts. The drone then declared the beginning of the match between Amanda Grouch and Go Hyuk-soo. Amanda immediately adopted capoeira's signature defensive stance, her body loose yet coiled, ready to fight. However, her opponent made no preparatory moves at all. He simply stood still, not even bothering to show a guard. Realizing this, Amanda concluded that he was clearly underestimating her and was not preparing properly. With that thought, she decided to strike first. She placed both hands on the floor and launched herself forward, spinning into a fast and powerful kick aimed directly at him. Yet, instead of dodging or defending, Go Hyuk-soo continued to stand there, even wearing a strange, airy smile. In the VIP area, Yeon-woo studied the match. Amanda using capoeira seemed acceptable to him, but he began to wonder internally about her opponent. On the calculation screen, Go Hyuk-soo's information appeared in detail. He was ranked 10th, and Yeon-woo reasoned that if this man had climbed into the top 10 of the prize money rankings, he was definitely not an ordinary fighter. Min-seok then provided more detailed information. Go Hyuk-soo had once been an MMA fighter, but his career had not been very successful. After he succeeded with a special doping that enhanced his senses, he developed an outstanding ability to observe his opponent's movements. Because of this, among the VIPs, he had even been given the nickname 10-second knockout. Recently, the betting amounts placed on him had increased significantly. This information genuinely surprised Yeon-woo and made him see the strange nickname in a new light. Min-seok explained further that all of Go Hyuk-soo's previous matches had ended in knockout victories and had never lasted more than 10 seconds. This fact truly intrigued Yeon-woo and made him feel that the record was incredible. Min-seok continued analyzing. Because each of Go Hyuk-soo's matches ended so quickly, he barely sustained any injuries. This very fact caused a lot of bets to be placed on him, and the reputation of cleanly finishing matches within 10 seconds helped him climb to such a high rank. Yeon-woo considered that if Go Hyuk-soo managed to maintain that reputation in the current round, then, as Min-seok pointed out, if everything went as expected, he would not only receive enormous prize money, but could also shoot straight up to rank 5 very quickly. Back on the arena floor, as Amanda's foot was about to crash down toward Go Hyuk-soo's head, he still stood there smirking. In his mind, he noted with amusement that even high-ranking fighters like her were easily lured in by his seemingly loose and careless defensive stance. Just as that thought ended, he instantly leaned aside with extreme speed, continuing his internal calculation. He judged that she was attacking too freely and believed that his superior motion perception could see through everything. In his mind, he did not even feel the need for a proper guard. At that moment, the clock hand pointed exactly at the 8th second. Go Hyuk-soo quickly grabbed Amanda's attacking leg and thought confidently that he could react instantly at any moment. He laughed maniacally inside, already preparing to deliver his finishing blow and mentally declaring the match over. However, as the clock hand moved to the 9th second, Go Hyoksu suddenly realized that his face was hurtling straight toward the floor at breakneck speed. The shock made his thoughts freeze for a moment as confusion flooded him. He could only register the sense of being dragged downward without understanding why he was on the floor. Swift as lightning, Amanda's other leg, the one that had been serving as her supporting leg, smashed brutally into his head. The impact embedded his skull straight into the hard arena floor, splattering fresh blood. Go Hyoksu did not even have time to understand what was happening to him. His eyes were wide with horror, and in his final clear thought, he could only stammer mentally about his own nickname, the 10-second knockout, in a broken, disbelieving way. Then, precisely at the 10th second, this supposedly formidable opponent finally slumped onto the ground, completely unconscious. The drone flew closer again to check Go Hyoksu's condition. It quickly confirmed and announced the final result, declaring the match ended with victory for Amanda Grouch. And this surprising result immediately made Yeonwoo in the VIP area exclaim inwardly in astonishment at what had just occurred. Minsok, standing beside him, calmly explained the reason behind the upset. In his view, it was because Go Hyoksu had believed that avoiding a single attacking step was already enough to count as a successful defense, and he had been too hasty in immediately switching to a counterattack. Yeonwoo was still internally confused, since in his mind avoiding an attack and then launching a counterattack felt like a standard combat pattern. Minsok acknowledged that this was true, and that Go Hyoksu had indeed thought in such simple terms. Minsok then elaborated. Normally, powerful kicks intended to knock out opponents required compressing energy on the side opposite to the point of impact, before releasing all of that compressed energy toward the final striking point. If the first attack failed or was dodged, the fighter usually would not have enough time to recompress the necessary energy for another kick of equal power. Therefore, it was very difficult to attack faster than the opponent's counterattack in such a situation, and it was also very hard to concentrate full power into that next kick. This problem became even more difficult when both fighters were airborne. The reason, Minsok clarified, was that airborne fighters lacked a stable foothold with which to compress and add extra force to their kicks. Yeonwoo considered the situation further, and noted mentally that Amanda should have been in a similar state, since both of them had been in the air, and her first attack had also technically failed. Minsok confirmed that this was indeed correct, and that this was precisely why Go Hyoksu had been so confident when he launched his counterattack. However, Minsok pointed out that Go Hyoksu had overlooked one extremely important detail about Amanda Grouch. Yeonwoo became curious about what this was, and Minsok then explained. The martial art capoeira allowed its practitioners to use their hands as a pivot point like legs. Furthermore, the type of doping Amanda used was not the common muscle mass increasing type. Instead, it drastically increased muscle density. This allowed her to become extremely powerful and fast without suffering from the limitations caused by excessive muscle mass. In other words, at this moment, Amanda Grouch was functioning like an almost unpredictable fighting machine. She possessed the ability to generate maximum power in any combat stance and at any moment. After hearing the explanation, Yeonwoo started laughing heartily with satisfaction, feeling relieved that they still had very promising fighters to make use of. Minsok then added that for Amanda, approaching and recruiting her now would not be easy anymore. This slightly surprised his boss again, and Minsok clarified the reason. She had ended the streak of the opponent known as 10-second knockout, and had broken his record in exactly 10 seconds. According to the unwritten rule in that place, she now inherited that title. This meant that all the massive bets the VIPs had previously poured into the 10-second knockout would now automatically transfer to Amanda. She was now receiving immense attention. Her prize money would skyrocket and her ranking would continuously climb. Hearing this, Yeonwoo clicked his tongue in annoyance, realizing that it meant they could barely compete with the other VIPs to acquire her. Minsok smiled and reassured him that there was no need to rush, since there were still many other powerful fighters waiting. He then probed again, mentioning that the fighter in the next match was the man who had been a 10-time champion in underground tournaments, stating that the next match would definitely be very interesting.